Part 1. The Incident. Keep your kid's cheap gadget away from my space. I didn't pay for first class to be bothered by you people. Richard Blackwood's voice cut through the ambient hum of Flight 783, sharp enough to make nearby passengers glance up from their magazines and devices. His Italian loafers shifted impatiently beneath the seat, Rolex glinting as he gestured toward the iPad balanced carefully on 11-year-old Jordan Thomas's lap. Jordan didn't look up, his fingers moving with practiced precision across the screen, headphones partially covering his ears as he adjusted a line of code. The screen displayed a colorful interface with large, accessible buttons and simplified navigation clearly designed for users with learning differences. "Excuse me, I'm talking to you, man," Blackwood insisted, removing his AirPods and leaning into Jordan's space. "That tapping is driving me insane. Some of us are trying to prepare for actual business meetings." Jordan finally noticed the man's irritation and carefully paused his work, sliding the headphones down to rest on his neck. "I'm sorry, sir. I'm just finishing this section of code. I have a deadline before we land." Blackwood scoffed, taking in Jordan's appearance, the carefully maintained twists in his hair, the NASA t-shirt, the worn sneakers. His eyes narrowed with unconcealed judgment. "Code right. Playing games, you mean? Look, kid, I don't know how you ended up in first class, but some of us are here to work, not play." "I'm not playing games," Jordan replied softly. "I'm programming an app for whatever." Blackwood cut him off, turning to look for a flight attendant. He caught the eye of Carmen Rodriguez, who was serving drinks 3 rows ahead. "Miss, is there any way to enforce some quiet in first class, or perhaps some seating adjustments?" Carmen approached with a professional smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Is there a problem, sir? This child is disturbing my work environment, and surely there's a policy about unaccompanied minors in first class." "I'm not unaccompanied," Jordan said, his voice remaining steady despite the flush of embarrassment creeping up his neck. "My dad just went to the restroom. He'll be back in a minute." Carmen's eyes flicked briefly to the empty aisle seat next to Jordan, then back to Blackwood's expectant face. "Mr. Blackwood, I'll check if there are any other available seats if you'd prefer to move." "Why should I move? I booked this specific seat for the extra legroom." Blackwood's voice rose slightly. "It's not my responsibility to accommodate disruptions." Other passengers were now openly watching the exchange. A woman across the aisle frowned slightly, while the businessman in 3C buried himself deeper in his financial magazine, clearly wanting no part of the confrontation. Jordan quietly saved his work and started to put the iPad away. "It's okay. I can stop working until my dad gets back." "No, now I'm curious," Blackwood said, his tone shifting to mocking interest. "What kind of coding is so important that it needs to disturb an entire cabin?" Before Jordan could answer, Blackwood reached over and plucked the iPad from the boy's hands. "Let me see this code you're so busy with." "Please give that back," Jordan said, his calm beginning to crack. "It has all my work on it. Just checking what's so important." Blackwood turned the device over in his hands, examining it with exaggerated interest. Not even the newest model. I figured as much." The iPad slipped from Blackwood's fingers, though several passengers would later describe it as more of a deliberate drop. It clattered onto the floor between their seats, sliding partially under the row ahead. "Oops," Blackwood said without a hint of genuine regret. Jordan quickly unbuckled his seatbelt and crouched down to retrieve his device. As he reached for it, Blackwood shifted in his seat, his heavy loafer coming down directly on the screen with an audible crack. "Oh no," Blackwood said, feigning surprise as he lifted his foot to reveal a spiderweb of cracks across the iPad's display. "You should be more careful where you put your toys." Jordan stared in horror at his damaged device, the screen now flickering between his coding project and ominous black patches where the display was failing. "You did that on purpose," he whispered, picking up the iPad with trembling hands. "Keep your toys away from business class, kid," Blackwood sneered, loud enough for several rows to hear. "Your kind belongs in economy." The cabin fell silent except for the steady drone of the engines. Jordan's eyes welled with tears he refused to let fall as he stared at months of work potentially lost behind a screen of fractured glass. Immediate aftermath. "My code," Jordan whispered, fingers gently touching the spiderweb glass. 6 months of work, each line carefully crafted during early mornings before school and late nights after homework. The screen flickered, showing fragments of his accessibility interface before going dark entirely. Blackwood turned away, adjusting his seat to a more comfortable position. Consider it a life lesson about personal space and appropriate behavior. Jordan's lower lip trembled, but he took a deep breath, just like his father had taught him. I have backups, he said quietly, though not recently enough to save the morning's critical improvements. But that wasn't an accident, sir. You broke it deliberately. Prove it, Blackwood replied, not bothering to look at the boy. I was simply crossing my legs, and your device was carelessly placed. Perhaps your father should teach you to take better care of expensive things. He took a sip of water, adding pointedly, if they actually were expensive. In row 2, Eliza Murray lowered her book. The university professor had been watching the entire interaction with growing concern. Discreetly, she removed her phone and positioned it to capture the ongoing situation, keeping it partially hidden behind her open novel. Excuse me, Carmen Rodriguez approached again, drawn by the commotion. Is everything all right here? This gentleman broke my iPad, Jordan explained, holding up the damaged device. He took it from me and then stepped on it. Carmen's eyes darted between the broken device and Blackwood's impassive face. Sir, is this true? Absolutely not. Blackwood straightened his tie. The boy dropped his tablet, and it accidentally ended up under my foot. These things happen. Children should be supervised more carefully in premium cabins. It has all my coding work for my accessibility app, Jordan explained, his voice steady despite his obvious distress. I've been developing it for months. It helps kids with learning disabilities navigate standard applications. Blackwood snorted. Please, what is he? 10, I'm sure he was just playing Minecraft or whatever kids do these days. I'm 11, Jordan corrected softly. And I've been coding since I was 7. Carmen's expression remained neutral, though her eyes lingered on Blackwood's expensive watch and tailored suit. I'll need to file an incident report. We take property damage very seriously on board. Oh, for heaven's sake, Blackwood rolled his eyes. It was clearly an accident. But sure, file your report. I'll explain to your supervisor how this child's negligence caused this minor incident. 2 rows back, a young man in his 20s had been recording the exchange. Minor incident, he muttered to his seatmate. That guy deliberately stomped on the kid's iPad. I got it all on video. Dude, post it, his companion whispered. This is crazy. Carmen turned to Jordan, her professional demeanor slightly cooler than when addressing Blackwood. I'll need to see your boarding pass, and we'll need to contact your guardian about this situation. My dad will be back any minute, Jordan said, still clutching the damaged iPad. He just went to use the restroom. Convenient timing, Blackwood remarked sarcastically. A woman sitting across from Jordan spoke up. I saw what happened. That man, she pointed at Blackwood, deliberately took the iPad from the boy's hands, dropped it, and then stepped on it. There was nothing accidental about it. Blackwood's face flushed with anger. Mind your own business. This is between the flight attendant and me. Actually, sir, Carmen replied, her professional mask slipping slightly. Since this involves another passenger and alleged property damage, it becomes an official incident that needs documentation. Jordan attempted to power on the iPad again, pressing the side button repeatedly. The screen flickered briefly, showing distorted fragments of his work before going dark again. A single tear finally escaped, rolling down his cheek before he quickly wiped it away. My accessibility features were almost finished, he said quietly. The voice commands for dyslexic users took weeks to program correctly. Dr. Murray continued filming discreetly, capturing Jordan's dignified distress alongside Blackwood's dismissive body language. She had taught enough privileged students to recognize entitlement when she saw it. Other passengers were reacting now. An elderly gentleman shook his head disapprovingly. A woman in a business suit shot Blackwood a disgusted look. A teenage girl whispered urgently to her mother while pointing toward Jordan's broken device. Blackwood seemed to notice the shift in cabin sentiment. Look, it's just a cracked screen. I'm sure it can be fixed. The boy should have been more careful with his belongings. You took it from him, another passenger interjected. I was simply examining what was causing all that disruptive noise. Blackwood defended himself, voice rising slightly. Then he grabbed for it, and it fell. Not my responsibility if he can't handle his toys properly. Carmen began filling out an incident form on her tablet. I'll need both your names for the report. This is ridiculous, Blackwood huffed. Richard Blackwood, Vice President of Marketing at Nexus Solutions. My company books hundreds of flights with your airline annually. You might want to consider that before filing some frivolous report. The implied threat hung in the air as Carmen turned to Jordan. And your name, young man? Jordan Thomas, he replied softly, still attempting to save his device. The app I was working on is called Navigate Ease. It's designed to help kids with learning disabilities use standard applications by simplifying interfaces and adding accessibility options. He's making that up, Blackwood dismissed with a wave. Kids his age don't develop apps. Dr. Murray's phone continued recording as she called quietly to Carmen. Flight attendant, I've been observing this entire interaction. I'd be happy to provide my contact information for your incident report as a witness. Carmen nodded, though her demeanor suggested uncertainty about how to proceed with a situation involving a high-status passenger against a child. Thank you, ma'am. I'll include that in my report. Jordan carefully placed his damaged iPad in its protective case, his hands still trembling slightly. My dad has the receipts for all the development software. He can verify everything. Undisciplined children shouldn't be allowed in first class, Blackwood announced to no one in particular. Some of us are trying to prepare for actual business matters. The cabin's atmosphere had grown noticeably tense. Several passengers were now openly recording the interaction on their phones. Carmen seemed increasingly uncomfortable with the situation's visibility. Where exactly is your father? She asked Jordan, glancing toward the rear of the aircraft. Right here, came a deep, measured voice from the aisle. Father's initial appearance. Marcus Thomas stood in the aisles, his 6'2" frame commanding immediate attention despite his casual attire, dark jeans, a simple navy polo, and a weathered leather jacket. His expression was calm but alert as he assessed the scene, his son clutching a damaged iPad, a flight attendant hovering with a report form, and the red-faced businessman occupying the window seat next to Jordan. What's happening here? Marcus asked, his voice controlled and steady. Jordan looked up at his father, visible relief washing over his face, though he maintained his composure. Dad, Mr. Blackwood took my iPad and stepped on it. The screen is completely shattered. Marcus's eyes narrowed slightly, but his expression remained measured. I see. He turned to Carmen. I assume you're documenting the incident. Yes, sir. Carmen replied, her tone notably more deferential than when addressing Jordan alone. We're filing an incident report. Property damage needs to be thoroughly documented. Blackwood shifted in his seat, straightening his tie. This is being blown completely out of proportion. The boy carelessly dropped his tablet, and it ended up under my foot. These things happen. Marcus turned his full attention to Blackwood. My son doesn't carelessly drop his development tools. Mr. Blackwood, Richard Blackwood, he extended his hand, which Marcus briefly acknowledged with a cursory handshake. VP of Marketing at Nexus Solutions. Look, I understand you're upset, but accidents happen in confined spaces. That wasn't an accident, Dr. Murray interjected from her seat. I witnessed the entire interaction. This gentleman, she nodded toward Blackwood, deliberately took the device from your son's hands, dropped it to the floor, and then stepped on it while making derogatory comments. Marcus nodded appreciatively at Dr. Murray before turning back to Carmen. I'd like the names of all witnesses included in your report. Please. Of course, sir, Carmen replied, though her eyes darted nervously toward Blackwood. We'll gather all relevant information. Marcus settled into his aisle seat beside Jordan, placing a reassuring hand on his son's shoulder. Let me see the damage. Jordan carefully handed over the iPad. The screen was a maze of cracks, with dark patches spreading across the display. When Marcus attempted to power it on, the device flickered weakly before going dark again. This is an iPad Pro with specialized development accessories, Marcus stated calmly. The total value is approximately $1,700, but the real concern is my son's work. He's been developing an accessibility app that was scheduled for beta testing next week. And $1,700 iPad? Blackwood scoffed. Please, that's clearly an older model worth half that, if that, And I find it hard to believe a child his age is developing anything beyond simple games. Marcus met Blackwood's gaze directly. My son has been coding since he was 7. He's currently working with our company's accessibility team to develop applications for children with learning disabilities. This particular project has been in development for 6 months. Your company? Blackwood raised an eyebrow, taking in Marcus's casual attire with obvious skepticism. Yes, Marcus replied simply, returning his attention to the damaged device. He pressed a combination of buttons, attempting a hard reset. The screen flickered briefly, showing fragments of Jordan's colorful interface before failing again. Carmen cleared her throat. Sir, if you could provide your contact information for the incident report. Marcus Thomas, he replied, still examining the iPad. My email is on my boarding pass. Carmen recorded the information, her stylus hovering uncertainly over her tablet. And will you be seeking compensation for the damaged device? I'll be seeking full replacement of the device, compensation for the lost development time, and an acknowledgement of responsibility. Marcus stated firmly, this was not an accident. Blackwood's face flushed. That's absurd. I'm not admitting to anything, much less paying for some overpriced toy that was carelessly mishandled. It wasn't a toy, Poe, Jordan said quietly. It was helping kids like your nephew. Blackwood blinked in surprise. What are you talking about? Earlier, before we took off, Jordan explained. You were on the phone talking about your nephew who has dyslexia. You said his parents were spending thousands on special tutoring and technology. My app is designed exactly for kids like him. It creates simplified interfaces and voice controls that make standard applications accessible. A flicker of uncertainty crossed Blackwood's face before he dismissed it with a wave. That's a remarkable coincidence you've invented. I'm not falling for emotional manipulation. Marcus turned to Carmen. I'd like to speak with your lead flight attendant. Please? Of course, Carmen replied, clearly relieved to escalate the situation. I'll get Patricia right away. As Carmen moved toward the front of the cabin, Marcus turned to Jordan. Did you back up your most recent code to the cloud? This morning before we left the hotel, Jordan replied. But I made significant changes to the voice command module during the flight. Those updates aren't saved anywhere else. Marcus nodded, his expression thoughtful rather than angry. We'll see what we can recover. He turned back to Blackwood. Mr. Blackwood, I understand that accidents can happen, but based on multiple witness accounts, this was a deliberate act. I'm giving you an opportunity to acknowledge that and make it right. Make it right, Blackwood snorted. Control your kid and buy him a cheaper toy if he can't take care of expensive electronics. Better yet, teach him appropriate behavior in premium cabins. A middle-aged woman across the aisle shook her head. The boy was perfectly behaved. You were the one making a scene. Nobody asked you, Blackwood snapped. Several phones were now openly recording the exchange. The young man who had been filming earlier whispered to his seatmate, "This is going viral for sure. Hashtag first-class bully is about to trend." Carmen returned with Patricia Walker, a tall, silver-haired flight attendant with the authoritative presence that came with decades of experience. Mr. Thomas, I understand there's been an incident involving your son's property, Patricia said, her eyes quickly taking in the damaged iPad. Something in her expression shifted subtly as she looked at Marcus more closely. I'd like to get the details directly from you. Marcus explained the situation calmly, presenting the facts without emotional embellishment. Jordan occasionally added clarifying details about his project, speaking with a vocabulary and technical precision that belied his young age. Throughout the explanation, Patricia's eyes kept returning to Marcus with a curious expression, as though trying to place him. Blackwood noticed this too, his own gaze now moving between Marcus and the senior flight attendant with growing unease. Control your kid or buy him a cheaper toy, Blackwood repeated, though with slightly less conviction. This is business class, not a daycare. Patricia's professional mask slipped momentarily as she regarded Blackwood with obvious disapproval. Sir, we take property damage very seriously, particularly when it appears to be deliberate. Appears to be, Blackwood protested. You weren't even here. This is completely one-sided. We have multiple witness statements, Patricia replied coolly, gesturing to the passengers who had spoken up. And our incident report will reflect all accounts. Marcus remained focused on the immediate issue. My primary concern is my son's work. The device can be replaced, but his code is unique. As he spoke, Carmen was completing the incident report, occasionally glancing up at Blackwood with increasing discomfort. The dynamic in the cabin was shifting perceptibly, with more passengers openly watching and several recording discreetly. Blackwood's phone rang, breaking the tension. He checked the screen and answered immediately. Yes, James, I'm still in the air. He listened for a moment, his expression hardening. No, we're not delayed, just dealing with some nonsense in first class. A kid with an iPad. He paused, listening. Yes, of course I'm preparing for the Adamson meeting. This is just a distraction. As Blackwood spoke, he casually moved his free hand to adjust his seat, accidentally knocking Jordan's backpack from where it rested against the seat in front. School supplies and notebooks spilled into the aisle. Marcus caught Blackwood's deliberate movement, but simply bent down to help Jordan collect his belongings. Together, father and son calmly gathered the scattered items while Blackwood continued his loud business call. Yes, James, I'll be closing the Martinez deal immediately after landing. I've already told them we won't accept anything less than full exclusivity. He laughed loudly. Exactly, Tom. Sometimes you have to put people in their place. Remind them of the natural order. Patricia knelt to help collect Jordan's belongings, handling his notebooks with care. As she picked up a programming textbook, her eyes widened slightly at the advanced material. She handed it to Jordan with a small smile of approval. Thank you, Jordan said politely. Patricia nodded, then turned to Marcus. Mr. Thomas, would you and your son prefer to move to different seats? We have space available in the center of first class. Before Marcus could answer, Blackwood interjected, ending his call abruptly. If anyone should move, it's them. I paid for this specific seat for the extra legroom. Actually, Marcus replied, maintaining his calm demeanor. We'll stay right here. My son has done nothing wrong, and I want this incident fully documented with all relevant parties present. Patricia nodded, something like respect flickering in her eyes. Understood, sir. I'll make sure this incident receives appropriate attention. As she moved away, Blackwood muttered under his breath, Control your kid or buy him a cheaper toy. Your kind always expects special treatment. The cabin fell silent at his words. Jordan stiffened beside his father, eyes downcast. Marcus placed a protective hand on his son's shoulder, his expression remaining carefully neutral despite the obvious racial undertone of Blackwood's comment. Dr. Murray's phone continued recording, capturing every word. I want them moved to economy where they belong, Blackwood demanded, his voice rising as Patricia began walking away. This is completely unacceptable. I'm trying to prepare for a multi-million-dollar meeting. Patricia turned back slowly, her professional mask firmly in place despite the tightness around her eyes. Sir, all passengers with first-class tickets are entitled to their assigned seats. I cannot relocate them without cause. Without cause, Blackwood gestured dramatically at Jordan's broken iPad. The child has created a disruption and damaged my personal space. That's cause. Several passengers exchanged glances, clearly aware that Blackwood was inverting the truth. Dr. Murray continued her discreet recording, occasionally making notes in a small, leather-bound journal beside her phone. Mr. Blackwood, Marcus said evenly, my son was quietly working on his project before you intervened. The only disruption has come from your actions. Blackwood's face reddened. I won't be lectured about appropriate behavior by someone who clearly doesn't understand professional environments. Some of us have actual business responsibilities. Marcus raised an eyebrow but maintained his composed demeanor. I understand professional responsibility quite well, Mr. Blackwood. I also understand that respect is fundamental in any environment. Jordan had been examining his damaged iPad, trying various troubleshooting techniques with the focus of someone far beyond his years. He looked up at Blackwood. The app I was working on would have helped kids like your nephew. The voice command system translates complex text into simplified language and highlights key information for dyslexic users. For a moment, Blackwood seemed caught off guard by the specific reference to his earlier phone conversation. His expression flickered between irritation and something less certain before hardening again. Using a private conversation you overheard to manipulate sympathy is pretty low, he said dismissively. My nephew has access to the best specialists money can buy. He doesn't need some amateur hobby project. Jordan flinched slightly at the dismissal, but continued calmly. The best specialists use tools like mine. I've been working with education technology experts from Stanford. They're planning to use Navigate Ease as part of their research program for accessible learning. A child your age working with Stanford researchers? Blackwood scoffed loudly, looking around the cabin as if expecting others to join in his derision. Come on, this is getting ridiculous. A few rows back, a passenger who had been watching the interaction turned to his seatmate. Is this guy for real? The kid is clearly some kind of prodigy, and this jerk is just doubling down. His companion nodded, holding up her phone. I've been recording since he stepped on the iPad. This is going straight to Twitter when we land. Carmen returned with a replacement incident form. Having apparently made an error on the first one, she seemed increasingly uncomfortable as she approached their row. I've noted all witness statement, she said, avoiding direct eye contact with either Marcus or Blackwood. Is there anything else you'd like to add to the report? Yes, Blackwood interjected before Marcus could respond. I want it noted that I deny all responsibility for the damaged device, which was carelessly placed in a high-traffic area, and I want a formal complaint filed about the disruption to my business preparation time. Marcus shook his head slightly, then addressed Carmen directly. Please ensure the report includes the full value of the device, $1,700 for the iPad Pro, with development accessories plus an estimate for lost work and intellectual property. My son's app is scheduled for beta testing with educational institutions next week. Carmen nodded, recording the information with quick, nervous movements of her stylus. Patricia had returned to the galley area but was watching their row with increased attention, occasionally speaking into her crew phone. Blackwood's own phone rang again. He checked the screen and answered immediately. Hello, James? Yes, I was just telling you about this situation. His voice rose intentionally. Some people just don't understand appropriate first-class etiquette. As Blackwood continued his loud conversation, deliberately broadcasting his importance. Marcus turned to Jordan. How's the recovery looking? He asked quietly. Jordan shook his head, genuine distress breaking through his composed exterior for the first time. The local memory is completely corrupted. I can't access anything. This morning's voice command module had breakthroughs in the pattern recognition algorithms. I don't think I can reproduce it exactly from memory. Marcus squeezed his son's shoulder supportively. We'll figure it out. The team can help rebuild it if necessary. Blackwood ended his call and turned back to them with renewed confidence. Listen, I've just been reminded that I have an important meeting with the Adamson Group immediately after landing. I don't have time for this nonsense. Have your airline insurance people contact my assistant. He pulled out a business card and thrust it toward Carmen. This childish drama is cutting into my preparation time. Marcus intercepted the card smoothly, examining it with mild interest. Nexus Solutions? Aren't you the company that's been trying to secure distribution rights for Neurotech's educational platforms? Something flickered across Blackwood's face, a momentary uncertainty quickly masked by bravado. We have partnerships with numerous technology firms. Neurotech would be lucky to have our distribution network. Interesting perspective, Marcus replied, handing the card back to Carmen. I'm familiar with Neurotech's operational philosophy. They're quite selective about their partners, particularly regarding respect and inclusivity. Blackwood's phone rang yet again. This time, his expression shifted noticeably when he checked the screen. He declined the call with a quick swipe. The reality is, Blackwood continued as if the interruption hadn't occurred. Companies like Neurotech need firms like ours far more than we need them. We have established relationships with educational institutions across 3 continents. The phone rang again. Again, Blackwood declined it with visible irritation. Jordan had been listening to this exchange with growing interest, his damaged iPad temporarily forgotten. Dad, isn't Neurotech developing that new immersive learning environment for children with processing disorders? They are, Marcus confirmed. The beta testing begins next month, I believe. Blackwood's phone rang a third time. This time, he turned it off completely, shoving it into his jacket pocket with poorly concealed annoyance. Popular today, Marcus observed mildly. Just colleagues confirming details from my meetings in San Francisco. Blackwood replied dismissively. As I was saying, the business world operates on relationships and hierarchies, something you might want to explain to your son before he enters the professional world. Jordan looked directly at Blackwood for the first time since the iPad incident. My dad already taught me about professional relationships. He says they're built on mutual respect, not intimidation. Cute, Blackwood sneered. But in the real world, respect is earned through position and achievement, not handed out like participation trophies. The cabin had grown increasingly tense as more passengers tuned into the confrontation. Carmen hovered uncertainly with her incident report, clearly wanting to retreat from the escalating situation, but bound by duty to complete her documentation. Captain James Hernandez's voice came over the intercom, momentarily interrupting the tension. Ladies and gentlemen, we're beginning our initial descent into San Francisco. Flight attendants, please prepare the cabin for arrival. Patricia approached their row once more, her professional demeanor firmly in place. Mr. Blackwood, Mr. Thomas, we'll need to continue this discussion after landing. For now, I'll need to collect any loose items and ensure all electronic devices are properly stowed. As Patricia spoke, her eyes lingered briefly on Marcus with that same curious recognition from earlier. This time, Blackwood definitely noticed, his gaze moving between them with growing suspicion. Of course, Marcus replied, helping Jordan secure his damaged iPad and school materials. We'll continue this discussion on the ground. Blackwood muttered something under his breath, then turned pointedly toward the window, effectively dismissing them. As Patricia moved away, she leaned slightly toward Carmen and whispered something that caused the younger flight attendant's eyes to widen in surprise. Carmen glanced back at Marcus with a completely different expression than before, something between shock and respect. Dr. Murray, still recording discreetly, smiled to herself. Whatever was about to unfold, she had a feeling Richard Blackwood was completely unprepared for what awaited him in San Francisco. Part 2, the revelation. The aircraft's descent into San Francisco created a momentary pause in the confrontation. Jordan carefully stowed his damaged iPad in its protective case, handling it with the delicate touch of someone mourning a lost friend rather than a broken device. Marcus maintained his calm demeanor, occasionally glancing at his watch, not the flashy status symbol Blackwood sported, but a sleek, understated timepiece with a distinctive blue face. Patricia Walker returned to their row, ostensibly to check seatbelts and tray tables. As she leaned slightly toward Marcus, her professional mask slipped just enough to reveal a hint of deference. Mr. Thomas, is there anything you need before landing? She asked, her tone noticeably warmer than when addressing other passengers. We're fine, thank you. Marcus replied simply. Blackwood caught this subtle shift in treatment, his eyes narrowing as he observed the interaction. Quite the special service for someone dressed for economy, he muttered, just loud enough to be heard. Patricia's spine stiffened slightly, but her smile remained fixed. We value all our passengers, sir. The emphasis on all was subtle but unmistakable. As she moved away, Blackwood's attention was drawn to Marcus's wrist as he checked the time again. The watch wasn't ostentatious, but its distinctive design and subtle logo caught Blackwood's eye. His expression flickered with the first hint of uncertainty. That's an interesting timepiece, he commented, toned somewhere between casual and probing. Limited edition. Yes, Marcus replied without elaboration, turning his attention back to Jordan, who was sketching algorithm flowcharts in a notebook, already trying to reconstruct his lost work. Blackwood's phone vibrated in his pocket. He retrieved it, frowning at a notification on the screen. What the hell, he muttered, scrolling quickly before shoving the device back into his jacket. Dr. Murray continued her discreet observation from across the aisle, noting how several crew members were now making excuses to pass by their row, each glancing at Marcus with varying degrees of recognition. Whatever was happening, the airline staff were definitely aware of something that Blackwood wasn't. Carmen approached with fresh beverages, offering them with noticeably different demeanors, deferential toward Marcus and Jordan, coolly professional toward Blackwood. As she placed Marcus's sparkling water on his tray, she hesitated. Sir, I just wanted to say, I'm sorry about the earlier confusion. If I had known, it's fine, Marcus interrupted gently. No apology necessary. Carmen nodded, relief visible on her face as she hurried away. Blackwood watched this exchange with growing suspicion, his earlier confidence visibly eroding. The captain's voice came over the intercom again. Flight attendants, please take your seats for landing. As the announcement finished, Marcus's phone chimed with an incoming message. He glanced at it briefly, then set it to airplane mode. The notification briefly visible on the screen read, "Board meeting emergency discussion regarding Martinez acquisition." Jordan looked up from his notebook. "Dad, do you think we can recover any of the voice command algorithms? That was the breakthrough component for users with severe dyslexia." "We'll have the recovery team meet us at the gate," Marcus assured him. "If anyone can extract the data, it's them." "Recovery team," Blackwood interjected. "For a cracked screen, seems excessive. The hardware is replaceable," Marcus explained patiently. "My son's intellectual property is not. The algorithm he developed this morning represents a significant advance in accessibility technology." Blackwood scoffed, though with less conviction than before. "You talk about a child's iPad project like it's corporate intellectual property." "Because it is," Jordan stated simply. "The patent application was filed last month under my name, with Neurotech as the corporate assignee." For the first time, Blackwood's expression showed genuine confusion rather than contempt. "Neurotech, you're claiming your kid's app is officially affiliated with Neurotech?" Marcus nodded once, offering no further explanation. His phone vibrated again despite being in airplane mode, clearly a priority override message. He checked it discreetly, his expression remaining neutral despite whatever he read. The plane touched down with a gentle bump, taxiing toward the gate as passengers prepared for disembarkation. Blackwood's earlier bravado had faded considerably, replaced by a watchful calculation as he observed the continuing special attention from the crew. Patricia approached their row one final time. "Mr. Thomas, I've been informed that there will be representatives meeting your party at the gate. They've been cleared for immediate access to the jet bridge." "Thank you," Marcus replied. "Representatives." Blackwood's voice had lost some of its earlier arrogance. "Is that standard procedure for a damaged iPad?" Marcus turned to face Blackwood directly, his expression calm but resolute. "Mr. Blackwood, what's standard procedure when someone deliberately damages valuable technology containing proprietary software?" Before Blackwood could respond, the seatbelt sign dinged off, and first-class passengers began retrieving their belongings. As Marcus stood to access the overhead bin, his jacket opened slightly, revealing a company ID badge partially visible on his belt. The Neurotech logo was distinctive, though his position wasn't visible from Blackwood's angle. Blackwood stared at the badge, the color draining from his face. "You work for Neurotech?" "Yes," Marcus confirmed simply, retrieving their carry-on items. "In what capacity?" Blackwood asked, his tone now carefully modulated. Marcus handed Jordan his backpack. "We should continue this conversation after deplaning. I believe there are people waiting for us." As they moved toward the exit, Blackwood hurriedly gathered his own belongings, trying to keep pace. Other passengers deliberately slowed, creating distance to continue recording the unfolding drama. Dr. Murray remained close enough to maintain her documentation of the situation. At the aircraft door, Patricia stood with Carmen, both nodding respectfully to Marcus and Jordan as they passed. "Mr. Thomas, the representatives are waiting in the jet bridge," Patricia informed him. Blackwood followed closely behind, his expression oscillating between concern and calculation. As they emerged into the jet bridge, two sharply dressed individuals stood waiting, a man and a woman, both holding tablets with the Neurotech logo clearly visible. "Mr. Thomas," the woman greeted Marcus with obvious respect. "We came as soon as we received the alert about the damaged device." "Thank you, Amanda," Marcus replied. "This is my son, Jordan. His development tablet was damaged during the flight. We'll need immediate data recovery services." "The team is standing by," Amanda assured him, taking the damaged iPad with careful hands. "Dr. Rodriguez is personally overseeing the recovery effort." Blackwood hovered nearby, listening intently, his expression growing increasingly troubled as the exchange continued. The professional deference being shown to Marcus was impossible to miss. "And this is," the male representative asked, nodding toward Blackwood. "Richard Blackwood," Marcus supplied, "Vice President of Marketing at Nexus Solutions. Mr. Blackwood is responsible for the damaged device. We'll need his contact information for the replacement and compensation paperwork." "Of course," the man replied, tapping something into his tablet. "Nexus Solutions. Aren't they bidding on the educational distribution contract?" "They are," Marcus confirmed, "though I imagine this incident will factor into those discussions. Blackwood's face had gone completely pale. I think there's been a misunderstanding. If you work for Neurotech, we should discuss this privately, as fellow professionals. Marcus regarded him steadily. There's nothing to discuss privately. Mr. Blackwood, you deliberately damaged my son's development tablet, but containing proprietary algorithms. That will be addressed through proper channels. Let's be reasonable. Blackwood's tone had shifted to placating. I had no way of knowing who you were. That's precisely the point, Marcus replied. You shouldn't need to know someone's status to treat them with basic respect. As they continued down the jet bridge, Blackwood's phone vibrated again. This time he checked it immediately, his expression morphing from concern to alarm as he read the message. Is something wrong? Marcus inquired politely. No, nothing. Blackwood replied quickly, though his body language suggested otherwise. Just a meeting confirmation. The Neurotech representatives exchanged knowing glances. Mr. Thomas, Amanda said quietly, your executive team has been notified of the situation. They're requesting an immediate conference call. After we get Jordan's device to the recovery team, Marcus responded firmly. Blackwood was now staring at Marcus with dawning horror. Executive team, he repeated. Exactly what is your position at Neurotech, Mr. Thomas? Before Marcus could answer, they reached the gate area where a small crowd of airline officials and additional Neurotech personnel waited. Their respectful attention was focused entirely on Marcus and Jordan. Someone stepped forward with a tablet displaying a news article with Marcus's photo. The headline was partially visible. Neurotech CEO announces revolutionary educational technology initiative. Blackwood stopped dead in his tracks, the blood draining from his face as realization finally hit him. Attempted resolution. You're Marcus Thomas, Blackwood whispered, recognition washing over his features like cold water. You're not just at Neurotech. You're The terminal fell momentarily silent, the gathered airline officials and Neurotech representatives watching as Blackwood processed this revelation. Jordan stood quietly beside his father, his expression a careful neutral that belied his young age. Yes, Marcus confirmed simply. And this is my son, Jordan, whose development work you just destroyed. The magnitude of his situation seemed to hit Blackwood all at once, the damaged tablet, the derogatory comments, the dismissive attitude, all directed at the CEO of one of the most influential technology companies in America and his son. His mouth opened and closed several times before he found his voice. Mr. Thomas, I had no idea. Would it have mattered? Marcus interrupted, his tone still measured but with an underlying firmness. If I had been a teacher, a doctor, or simply another parent traveling with my child, would that have changed how you behaved? Blackwood shifted uncomfortably, aware of the multiple phones still recording the interaction. Obviously, this has been a terrible misunderstanding. I'm more than happy to cover the cost of replacing the device. This isn't about the device, Marcus replied. This is about respect. Mr. Blackwood, it's about acknowledging that you deliberately damaged someone else's property while making derogatory comments. Airline customer service manager David Wilson stepped forward, his expression the practiced mask of someone handling a high-priority situation. Mr. Thomas, we've prepared a private room if you'd prefer to continue this discussion away from the terminal. Thank you, Marcus nodded. But first, I want to ensure my son's work is transferred to the recovery team. Amanda gestured to two technicians who stood nearby with specialized equipment. Jordan handed over his damaged iPad, providing detailed information about the project structure and the specific modules he had been working on during the flight. His technical vocabulary and precision continued to belie his age, drawing surprised looks from the airline personnel. Full disk image first, Jordan instructed. Then targeted recovery of the voice command module from the temporary cache. The algorithm was using a unique pattern recognition sequence that might still be accessible even with the corrupted display drivers. The technicians nodded, clearly impressed by the young developer's expertise. We'll get right on it. Jordan, Dr. Rodriguez is standing by at the office with the backup server ready. As the recovery team departed with the damaged device, Marcus turned back to Blackwood, who was attempting to compose himself into some semblance of professional dignity. Mr. Thomas, Blackwood began, his voice modulated to sound contrite. I sincerely apologize for the unfortunate incident aboard the aircraft. Had I known who you were, That's exactly the problem, Marcus interrupted. You believe respect should be based on status rather than granted to every individual. He gestured toward the private room. Let's continue this conversation somewhere more appropriate. As they moved toward the designated room, Marcus's phone rang. He checked the screen, then answered. Yes, Robert, I'm aware of the situation. Yes, Jordan's device was damaged, but the team is working on recovery now. No, I don't think we need legal involved yet. Let's see if we can resolve this directly. Blackwood's expression grew increasingly alarmed as he listened to this one-sided conversation. By the time they entered the private room, beads of sweat had formed on his forehead, despite the terminal's air conditioning. Inside, David Wilson closed the door, creating a momentary bubble of quiet amid the airport chaos. Dr. Murray had somehow managed to join the group, her academic credentials apparently sufficient to grant her access. She sat quietly in the corner, still documenting the unfolding situation. Mr. Blackwood, Marcus began once they were seated. I'd like to offer you the opportunity to resolve this situation appropriately. Of course, Blackwood replied quickly. I'm prepared to cover all damages and compensate for any inconvenience. This isn't about money, Jordan interjected, surprising everyone with his confident voice. You deliberately broke something I created because you thought I wasn't important enough to be treated with respect. The room fell silent at the 11-year-old's clear articulation of the issue. Blackwood shifted uncomfortably in his chair. The app I was developing helps kids like your nephew, Jordan continued. The voice command module I was coding this morning would have made it possible for severely dyslexic users to navigate standard applications through simplified verbal commands. That work is now potentially lost because you wanted to put me in my place. Marcus placed a supportive hand on his son's shoulder, but allowed him to speak without interruption. Blackwood struggled visibly. I apologize for damaging your device. It was unprofessional of me. It wasn't just unprofessional, Jordan replied. It was wrong. You wouldn't have done it if you knew who my dad was. That's the problem. Marcus leaned forward slightly. My son raises an important point, Mr. Blackwood. Character is defined by how we treat people when we think there are no consequences. You believed you could intimidate and demean a child without repercussions. That wasn't my intention, Blackwood protested weakly. Your words suggested otherwise. Dr. Murray spoke up from her corner. Your kind belongs in economy. That statement carries implications beyond mere cabin placement. Blackwood's face reddened. I was referring to children. I would never. We have multiple witness statements and recordings, David Wilson noted, consulting his tablet. Several passengers have already submitted video evidence of the incident. Marcus's phone rang again. He checked it, then declined the call. Mr. Blackwood, I understand you're scheduled to meet with Neurotech's educational division this afternoon regarding distribution rights. Blackwood swallowed hard. Yes. We've been in talks for several months about representing your educational technology suite in the southeastern market. I see, Marcus nodded thoughtfully. And your company, Nexus Solutions, prides itself on inclusive distribution practices. Your marketing materials emphasize accessibility and equal educational opportunities. Absolutely, Blackwood confirmed eagerly. Inclusive education is one of our core values. This incident was completely out of character. I assure you, Bartem, Jordan looked at his father, then back to Blackwood. If it was out of character, why did you call me trash when you thought no one important was listening? The room fell silent again. Blackwood's mouth opened, but no words emerged. I believe, Marcus said into the silence, that actions reveal true character more clearly than marketing materials or mission statements. Blackwood's phone vibrated. He glanced at it nervously, then paled visibly at whatever message he had received. Mr. Thomas, please. His voice had lost all its earlier arrogance. This is a tremendous opportunity for both our companies. I made a terrible mistake, but surely we can find a path forward that doesn't jeopardize a beneficial business relationship. I'm always open to paths forward, Marcus replied calmly, but they must be built on genuine accountability, not damage control. What would you consider appropriate accountability? Blackwood asked cautiously. First, a genuine acknowledgement of what actually occurred. Marcus stated, want an apology for an unfortunate incident or a misunderstanding, but recognition that you deliberately damaged my son's property while making derogatory comments. Blackwood hesitated, visibly calculating the professional cost of such an admission. I acknowledge that I deliberately damaged Jordan's iPad and made inappropriate comments. It was wrong and completely unprofessional. Second, Marcus continued, full compensation for both the physical device and the intellectual property potentially lost. Our development team will assess the actual value once recovery efforts are complete. Of course, Blackwood agreed quickly. Whatever the amount. Third, Marcus said, his tone firmer now. This incident reflects on your company's culture and values. Before any partnership discussions can continue, Nexus Solutions would need to demonstrate a genuine commitment to inclusivity and respect that goes beyond marketing materials. Blackwood's relief at the mention of partnership discussions was palpable. We can implement additional training immediately, diversity and inclusion workshops, sensitivity training, whatever you recommend. Jordan had been listening quietly, his expression thoughtful beyond his years. What about your nephew? He asked suddenly. My nephew, Blackwood seemed confused by the shift. The one with dyslexia, Jordan clarified. The one whose parents are spending thousands on special tutoring and technology. What if instead of just paying for my iPad, you helped make sure kids like him get access to tools like my app? Marcus smiled slightly at his son's suggestion. An excellent point, Jordan. Blackwood looked between father and son, realization dawning that this might be his path to professional salvation. Yes, absolutely. My brother's son Ryan does struggle with severe dyslexia. They've spent a fortune on specialized programs with limited success. I'd be happy to contribute to making your technology more accessible. We have a beta testing program starting next month, Jordan explained, his passion for the project overcoming his earlier distress. We need real users with different learning challenges to help refine the interface. Participants get lifetime access to the final product and all future updates. For the first time, something genuine flickered across Blackwood's face, not calculation or fear, but actual interest. Ryan's 14, his reading level test at third grade despite above-average intelligence. Would he qualify for something like that? Exactly the user profile we need, Jordan confirmed. The voice command system I was developing today would allow him to navigate standard applications without struggling with text-based menus. As Jordan spoke, the door opened and Amanda returned, her expression professionally neutral. Mr. Thomas, the recovery team has completed their initial assessment. They'd like to speak with Jordan about the recovered data. Jordan looked to his father, who nodded permission. As Jordan stepped outside with Amanda, Marcus turned back to Blackwood. Mr. Blackwood, I believe in second chances. We all make mistakes. The question is whether we learn from them or merely manage their consequences. I understand, Blackwood replied, his earlier arrogance completely absent. This has been enlightening. I never intended. He trailed off, perhaps realizing that his intentions were precisely the issue. Marcus's phone rang again. This time he answered, listening briefly before responding. I'll be there shortly. Yes, the situation is being addressed. No, the meeting can proceed as scheduled, just pushed back 30 minutes. He ended the call and stood. Mr. Blackwood, I need to attend to some company matters. The airline has your contact information for follow-up regarding the incident. Blackwood rose hastily. What about our meeting this afternoon? Is the distribution partnership still under consideration? Marcus regarded him thoughtfully. That depends entirely on what happens next. True accountability isn't about a single conversation or a moment of contrition when caught. It's about lasting change. As Marcus moved toward the door, Dr. Murray approached him. Mr. Thomas, if I may, I've documented the entire incident as an objective third party. If you need this for any official proceedings, I'd be happy to provide my statement. Thank you, Dr. Murray, Marcus replied. I appreciate your willingness to stand up for what's right, even when it would have been easier to remain silent. This quiet observation hung in the air as Marcus exited, leaving Blackwood alone with the airline representative and Dr. Murray's unflinching gaze. The revelation, the private room's door closed with a soft click behind Marcus, leaving Richard Blackwood staring at the space where the Neurotech CEO had stood moments before. The air felt suddenly heavy with the weight of consequences, as airport sounds filtered distantly through the walls. Marcus Thomas, Blackwood whispered to himself, the name now carrying an entirely different significance than it had an hour earlier. His hand moved unconsciously to loosen his tie, which suddenly felt too tight against his throat. David Wilson, the airline representative, consulted his tablet with studied professionalism. Mr. Blackwood, we'll need your statement for our incident report. Our policy regarding deliberate damage to another passenger's property is quite clear. Of course, Blackwood replied mechanically, his mind elsewhere calculating the professional ramifications of what had just occurred. I'll provide whatever is needed. Dr. Murray remained seated in the corner, her academic observer's eye missing nothing. Fascinating, isn't it? She remarked, closing her notebook. How quickly power dynamics can shift when assumptions prove incorrect. Blackwood shot her an irritated glance but said nothing, recognizing that antagonizing another witness would only compound his problems. His phone vibrated again, the fifth notification in as many minutes. This time he checked it with visible dread. The message on a screen made him physically recoil. Urgent Neurotech meeting canceled. CEO Marcus Thomas has requested immediate review of all pending contracts with Nexus Solutions. Report to headquarters ASAP. James. Is everything all right, Blackwood? Dr. Murray inquired with professional curiosity rather than genuine concern. Fine, he replied shortly, shoving the phone back into his pocket. His hand trembled slightly, the first crack in his composed exterior. Outside the room, visible through a small window in the door, activity had intensified. Neurotech representatives moved with purpose. Several of them clustered around Jordan, who was examining a tablet one of the technicians held. Despite his youth, the staff clearly treated him with professional respect, listening attentively as he pointed to something on the screen. Through the glass, Blackwood watched as another group approached, three individuals in business attire with Neurotech badges, moving with the unmistakable purpose of executives on a mission. They greeted Marcus with the familiar deference of colleagues rather than subordinates. One woman professionally dressed with a tablet displaying charts engaged Marcus in what appeared to be a data review, pointing to specific metrics as she spoke. Mr. Thomas's exact position at Neurotech wasn't on your radar, Dr. Murray asked, following Blackwood's gaze. I deal with educational distribution, not corporate leadership, Blackwood replied defensively. Neurotech has thousands of employees, but only one CEO, Wilson observed neutrally, completing his report. Outside, the scene continued unfolding. A news crew had somehow caught wind of the situation, setting up at a discreet distance. Social media notifications pinged on several visible phones, suggesting the incident was already gaining traction online. Blackwood's own phone rang, his company's distinctive ringtone cutting through his mental fog. He answered immediately. Yes, James. I know. It wasn't. You don't understand the situation. He listened, his face growing increasingly ashen. 3 years of negotiations. I understand, yeah, Bosam. Damage controls. No, he didn't explicitly say the deal was off, but another long pause. Yeah, sir, I'll handle it. He ended the call, his hand dropping limply to his side. The mask of corporate confidence had completely crumbled, revealing the panicked man beneath. Your meeting with Neurotech, Dr. Murray inquired, though her tone suggested she already knew the answer. Postponed indefinitely, Blackwood confirmed, his voice hollow. He moved toward the window again, watching as Marcus now stood surrounded by a growing entourage of airline executives and Neurotech personnel. From this new angle, Blackwood could see a tablet where one of the executives held displaying what appeared to be a news article with his own company's logo beside Neurotech's. The partial headline was visible, Neurotech considering $3.7 billion educational technology partnership. $3.7 billion, he whispered, the full magnitude of his situation finally hitting him. The Martinez contract. Wilson, who had been professionally detached throughout the process, looked up with sudden interest. The Martinez Educational Initiative, the nationwide accessibility program. Blackwood nodded numbly. Nexus Solutions has been negotiating distribution rights for 3 years. The final meeting was scheduled for this afternoon. His voice cracked slightly. We were the front runners. Murray noted the past tense. Before Blackwood could respond, the door opened and Amanda returned. her expression professionally neutral, though her eyes held something like satisfaction. Mr. Blackwood, there's been a development regarding your scheduled meeting with Neurotech's Educational Division. It's been canceled, I know, he replied resignedly. Not canceled, she corrected. Modified? CEO Thomas has requested your presence at corporate headquarters instead of the satellite office. The board of directors wishes to discuss the incident personally before making any decisions about pending contracts. Blackwood's expression cycled rapidly through shock, fear, hope, and calculation. The board wants to meet with me directly. When? Immediately, Amanda replied. Transportation is being arranged as we speak. Outside the room, the activity had intensified. Jordan was now speaking animatedly with several technical staff, apparently explaining something about his application's architecture. Despite his youth, the adults around him were taking notes, clearly valuing his expertise. Marcus stood at the center of another group, his casual attire now seeming like a deliberate choice rather than a fashion statement, a CEO confident enough to travel without the armor of a business suit. He checked his watch, the distinctive timepiece that Blackwood now recognized as a limited edition Chronos Eclipse, designed specifically for technology innovators and valued at over $30,000. One of only 50 made, Dr. Murray noted, following Blackwood's gaze. Given to Marcus Thomas after Neurotech's artificial intelligence platform won the Global Innovation Award last year. I was at the ceremony in Stockholm. Blackwood's mouth tightened as another piece fell into place. You know who he is. You knew from the beginning. I'm a professor of business ethics at Stanford, Dr. Murray replied with a small smile. Marcus guest lectures in my advanced leadership seminar every spring. His presentation on inclusive technology development is always our most popular session. This revelation hit Blackwood like a physical blow. Not only had he antagonized the CEO of Neurotech and damaged his son's property, but he had done so in front of a Stanford professor who regularly collaborated with Thomas. As this realization sank in, the door opened again. This time, Jordan entered, followed by one of the technical staff carrying what appeared to be a brand new iPad Pro. Mr. Blackwood, Jordan addressed him directly, his young voice steady and confident. The recovery team managed to salvage approximately 87% of this morning's coding work. The core voice command algorithm was recovered from cached memory, though some of the optimization subroutines were lost. That's good news, Blackwood managed, uncertain how to address the child he had so thoroughly dismissed earlier. It is, Jordan agreed. It means the beta testing can proceed on schedule, including the program for students like your nephew. Blackwood blinked in surprise. You're still considering including Ryan in the testing program, even after what happened. The app is designed to help all kids with learning differences, Jordan explained matter-of-factly. Your actions don't change their needs. The simple wisdom of this statement hung in the air, a stark contrast to Blackwood's earlier behavior. Before he could respond, his phone buzzed with yet another notification. This one made him physically stagger as he read it. On screen was a social media alert. A video of the airplane incident had been posted online with the hashtag #IPadBully. It had already accumulated 87,000 views and was trending rapidly. The still image showed him clearly stepping on Jordan's iPad while the boy watched in distress. Mr. Blackwood, Amanda prompted. The car is waiting to take you to Neurotech headquarters. The board is assembling for an emergency session regarding the Martinez contract. As the full implications crashed down upon him, Blackwood finally understood the true magnitude of what had occurred on Flight 783. In the space of a 2-hour flight, he had deliberately damaged the property of Neurotech's CEO's son, made derogatory comments that were recorded by multiple witnesses, potentially jeopardized a $3.7 billion contract his company had pursued for 3 years, become a viral sensation for all the wrong reasons, and now faced a board meeting that would determine not just the contract's fate, but likely his entire career. I need to call my office, he said weakly. There's time for that in the car, Amanda replied, gesturing toward the door. The board won't wait. As they exited the room, the terminal had transformed into a hive of activity. Airline executives, Neurotech personnel, and curious onlookers created a buzz of conversation. At the center stood Marcus Thomas, no longer just a casually dressed father in first class, but visibly the gravitational center around which this corporate universe orbited. Marcus was speaking quietly with Jordan, one hand resting proudly on his son's shoulder. The boy's dignified composure throughout the ordeal stood in stark contrast to Blackwood's crumbling facade. As Blackwood approached, conversation died away. Marcus looked up, his expression neither angry nor triumphant, but evaluative, the measured assessment of a CEO determining whether someone deserved a second chance. "Mr. Blackwood," Marcus acknowledged him with a slight nod. "I understand you'll be joining us at headquarters." "Yes, sir," Blackwood replied, the sir slipping out automatically where before he had been dismissive and condescending. "Good," Marcus said simply. "Actions have consequences, but they also create opportunities for growth, which this becomes is entirely up to you." With those words hanging in the air, Marcus turned his attention back to his son, the subtle shift making it clear that in this moment, Jordan's well-being was more important than any business matter, regardless of the billions at stake. Standing there, watching father and son together, Blackwood finally understood the full truth that had been revealed. True power wasn't found in first-class seats or executive titles or designer watches. It resided in character and how you treated people when you thought no one important was watching. And Richard Blackwood had failed that test spectacularly. Part 3. Immediate consequences. Captain James Hernandez moved through the terminal with the confident stride of someone accustomed to command. His uniform immaculate despite the 6-hour flight. His presence immediately registered with the airline staff, who straightened perceptibly as he approached the growing assembly outside the private meeting room. "Mr. Thomas," he greeted Marcus with professional respect. "I've been briefed about the incident aboard my aircraft. On behalf of Transcontinental Airlines, I want to personally apologize for your experience today." Marcus shook the captain's offered hand. "Thank you, Captain Hernandez. I appreciate your attention to the matter. We take incidents like this extremely seriously," Hernandez continued, his Spanish accent becoming slightly more pronounced as his professional concern showed through. "Our airline has specific protocols for situations involving property damage and inappropriate passenger conduct." David Wilson, the customer service manager, stepped forward with a tablet displaying official forms. "We've initiated our VIP incident response protocol. Sir, the documentation has been expedited to senior management." Blackwood noticed the designation VIP incident response with a sinking feeling. This wasn't the standard passenger complaint process. This was the airline's high-priority procedure reserved for major disruptions involving their most valued customers. Patricia Walker, the senior flight attendant, had joined them as well, standing beside Carmen Rodriguez. The contrast in their demeanors was striking. Patricia professional, but clearly sympathetic to Marcus and Jordan, while Carmen looked deeply uncomfortable, her earlier treatment of the situation clearly weighing on her. "The crew statements have been submitted," Patricia reported, "including timestamps and detailed observations from multiple staff members." Captain Hernandez nodded. "We've also received 16 passenger statements and video evidence from 8 different angles. Our security team is compiling everything for a comprehensive incident report." The methodical, thorough response made it clear that this was no routine customer service matter. The airline was treating it with the gravity of a major security incident, mobilizing resources across multiple departments. "What happens next?" Jordan asked, his interest in processes and systems evident, despite the circumstances. Captain Hernandez addressed him directly, treating the 11-year-old with the same respect he showed adults. "Excellent question. Our chief customer officer has been notified and is personally reviewing the case. The incident report will be finalized within 24 hours, at which point formal actions will be implemented." Jordan nodded thoughtfully. "Does that include compensation for damaged property?" "It does," Wilson confirmed. "Our liability policy covers passenger property damaged by other passengers, though in this case, since Mr. Blackwood has acknowledged responsibility, the claim will be processed under our accelerated resolution protocol." Blackwood shifted uncomfortably as all eyes briefly turned to him. The machinery of corporate consequence was moving with impressive efficiency, each procedural step documented and witnessed. A woman in a sharp business suit approached, her airline executive badge identifying her as Maria Gonzalez, Vice President of Customer Experience. "Mr. Thomas, I just landed from our Chicago office specifically to address this situation. I want to assure you that Transcontinental Airlines is taking this incident with the utmost seriousness." "I appreciate that, Ms. Gonzalez," Marcus replied. Though I want to emphasize that my primary concern is the recovery of my son's work, not punitive measures. Gonzalez nodded understanding. Of course. However, we have clear policies regarding passenger conduct and property damage. Those will be implemented independently of any personal requests. She turned to address Blackwood directly, her professional demeanor cooling noticeably. Mr. Blackwood, as you've acknowledged responsibility for deliberately damaging another passenger's property, I must inform you that Transcontinental Airlines will be placing a formal restriction on your travel privileges. Restriction, Blackwood echoed, another domino falling in his cascade of consequences. Yes, Gonzalez confirmed. Based on the severity of the incident and the multiple witness statements confirming deliberate property damage and inappropriate conduct, you will be placed on our restricted passenger list for a minimum of 12 months. The implications hit Blackwood immediately. His company booked dozens of flights monthly through Transcontinental, their preferred airline partner. Being on the restricted list would impact not just his personal travel, but potentially his company's entire relationship with the carrier. Is that really necessary? He asked, trying to keep desperation from his voice. I've acknowledged my mistake and offered compensation. Our policy is quite clear, Gonzalez replied without sympathy. Deliberate damage to another passenger's property, particularly when accompanied by inappropriate comments of a discriminatory nature, triggers automatic restrictions. Carmen Rodriguez stepped forward hesitantly. Ms. Gonzalez, if I may, my initial handling of the situation was not optimal. I failed to recognize the seriousness of the incident when first reported. Gonzalez turned to the flight attendant, her expression professional but concerned. We'll address crew response in our internal review. Ms. Rodriguez, for now, please ensure your statement includes all relevant observations. Carmen nodded, casting an apologetic glance toward Jordan. Yes, ma'am. I've already submitted my initial report and am preparing a supplemental statement with additional details I recalled. The methodical documentation continued around them, photographs of the damaged iPad, signed witness statements, security footage from the aircraft being transferred to official servers. Each procedural step further solidified the case against Blackwood, creating an institutional record of his conduct that would follow him long after this day. Captain Hernandez consulted his phone briefly, then addressed Marcus again. Sir, our CEO, John Reynolds, is on a flight from New York, but has requested a video call with you at your earliest convenience. He wants to personally address the incident. That won't be necessary, Marcus replied. I'm satisfied with the professional response so far. Nevertheless, he insists, Hernandez said. Transcontinental values our relationship with Neurotech and with you personally. Mr. Reynolds feels this warrants his direct attention. The mention of the corporate relationship caused Blackwood to wince visibly. Another dimension of consequence, he hadn't considered Neurotech executives presumably flew frequently, and their corporate travel contracts represented significant revenue for airlines. Gonzalez consulted her tablet. Mr. Blackwood, we'll need you to complete a formal statement before you leave the terminal. Security will escort you to our administrative office after your meeting with Neurotech. Security escort, Blackwood repeated, his professional dignity crumbling further. Is that really necessary? Standard procedure for incidents involving deliberate property damage? Gonzalez explained without sympathy. We take passenger safety and security very seriously. As if summoned by her words, two uniformed airport security officers appeared at a discreet distance, clearly waiting for instructions. Their presence transformed what had begun as an interpersonal conflict into something with official, institutional weight. Jordan had been observing this procedural response with clear interest, his analytical mind visibly processing each aspect of the system in action. It's like watching a real-time demonstration of consequence management protocols, he observed to his father. Marcus smiled slightly at his son's perspective. Systems exist for a reason. When they work properly, they help ensure fair treatment for everyone involved. This quiet exchange wasn't lost on Blackwood, who was experiencing firsthand what it meant to be on the receiving end of consequence management protocols. Each procedural step further solidified his actions into official record, transforming a moment of arrogance into a permanent part of his professional identity. A technical staff member approached Jordan with the replacement iPad. We've completed the initial data transfer. The core algorithms were recovered successfully. though some of the interface customizations may need to be reconstructed. Jordan examined the device, scrolling through lines of code with the focused attention of a craftsman assessing damaged work. The voice command module looks intact. That was the critical breakthrough. We're still running deep recovery on some of the fragmented files, the technician explained. Dr. Rodriguez thinks we can reconstruct about 95% of this morning's work when combined with the cloud backup from earlier. For the first time since the incident began, Jordan smiled a genuine expression of relief that transformed his young face. That's much better than I expected. The dyslexia-specific voice commands were the most important component. Watching this exchange, Blackwood seemed to truly register for the first time that the child's toy he had so dismissively destroyed was actually significant technical work, not a game or social media distraction, but genuine innovation designed to help vulnerable users. Carmen approached Jordan hesitantly. "I owe you an apology," she said quietly. "When you reported the damaged iPad, I didn't take your concerns seriously because of your age. I made assumptions that were unfair and unprofessional." Jordan regarded her thoughtfully. "It's okay. People often underestimate kids, especially when they're doing things adults don't expect." "That's no excuse," Carmen replied. "Part of my job is to treat all passengers with equal respect. Perhaps this can be a learning opportunity for our entire crew," Patricia suggested, joining the conversation. "We could develop specific training around assumptions and bias." Marcus nodded approvingly. That would be a constructive outcome from this situation. As the airline's response continued to unfold with methodical efficiency, Blackwood stood somewhat apart, watching as his momentary arrogance transformed into a cascade of professional consequences. His phone vibrated yet again, another urgent message from his office, undoubtedly demanding updates on this situation. The systematic, documented response made one thing abundantly clear. This was no longer about a broken iPad. It had become an institutional case study in accountability, one that would reverberate through corporate policies and training programs long after the immediate incident was resolved. Social media explosion. Kevin Wright, the 29-year-old social media manager who had been recording the confrontation from his first-class seat, wasted no time. The moment the plane's wheels touched the ground at San Francisco International, he connected to the airport Wi-Fi and began uploading his footage to multiple platforms simultaneously. "Absolutely insane scene on my flight today," his caption read. "Executive type deliberately destroys black kid's iPad after mocking him. Plot twist, kid's dad turns out to be CEO of major tech company. Hashtag iPad justice. Hashtag flight bully. Hashtag first class fail." The first platform to register significant traction was Twitter, where Wright's initial post gained 5,000 retweets within 15 minutes. His follow-up tweets, providing additional context and video angles, pushed engagement even higher. Update: the kid wasn't playing games. He was coding an app that helps children with learning disabilities. This dude stomped on it because the kid was disrupting his important business calls. Hashtag iPad justice. Second update: the father is Marcus Thomas, CEO of Neurotech. The guy who broke the iPad works for a company trying to get a contract with them. Career suicide caught on camera. Hashtag flight bully inside the terminal. Dr. Murray had been discreetly monitoring the online reaction on her phone. She approached Marcus with professional concern. "Mr. Thomas, I thought you should know that video of the incident is gaining significant traction online. Several hashtags are trending, including hashtag iPad justice and hashtag flight bully." Marcus nodded, unsurprised. "In today's world, privacy in public spaces is largely an illusion. I appreciate the heads up." Jordan peered at Dr. Murray's phone with interest. "How many views so far?" "The original video has over 87,000 and climbing rapidly," Dr. Murray reported. "Comments are overwhelmingly supportive of you and critical of Mr. Blackwood." Blackwood, who had been standing nearby awaiting his escort to Neurotech headquarters, blanched visibly at this information. "Is my name mentioned in these posts?" "Not yet," Dr. Murray replied. "But given the corporate connection that's emerging in the narrative, I expect it's only a matter of time before you're identified," as if confirming her prediction. Blackwood's phone buzzed with another notification. He checked it, his expression growing increasingly horrified. "My LinkedIn profile views just jumped by 300%. People are already connecting the dots. Across the terminal, other passengers from Flight 783 were adding their perspectives to the unfolding online narrative. The young couple who had been sitting several rows behind Blackwood had created a TikTok video summarizing the incident, complete with reaction shots and text overlays highlighting the most dramatic moments. When he realized who the dad was, hashtag corporate justice, hashtag instant karma, hashtag busted. Their video had already accumulated 43,000 views and was being shared across multiple platforms. Comments flooded in from viewers around the world. The way he treated that kid before knowing who his dad was shows his true character. This is why you should always treat everyone with respect. You never know who they are. As someone with dyslexia, I'm actually more upset about him destroying an accessibility app than about the iPad itself. Kevin Wright approached their group, his phone still recording. Mr. Thomas, Kevin Wright, social media specialist, would you care to comment on what happened aboard the flight today? Your response to the incident is gaining significant attention online. Before Marcus could reply, Amanda from Neurotech stepped between them. Mr. Thomas won't be providing statements to social media at this time. Neurotech will issue an official response through appropriate channels. Wright nodded professionally, though his disappointment was evident. Of course. And Mr. Blackwood, any response to the public reaction to your actions on the flight? Blackwood opened his mouth, then closed it again, clearly recognizing that anything he said would likely make the situation worse. No comment at this time, he finally managed. Understood, Wright replied, though his continued recording suggested he was capturing Blackwood's discomfort for later posting. Just so you're aware, the hashtag #IPadJustice is trending nationally, and several news outlets have picked up the story. CNN Business just tweeted about a major incident involving Neurotech leadership. Marcus checked his own phone, scrolling through messages with practiced efficiency. Our PR team is monitoring the situation. They'll issue a statement once all facts are verified. Jordan had been watching this social media explosion with the curious detachment of a digital native who understood the mechanics of viral content. Dad, people are asking about Navigate Ease. Should we release the beta announcement earlier than planned? Marcus considered this thoughtfully. Let's discuss that with the development team. This situation shouldn't dictate our product timeline, but it might present an opportunity to highlight accessibility issues. Meanwhile, Blackwood's professional world continued to unravel through his vibrating phone. Text messages, emails, and app notifications created a constant buzz of escalating consequences. He checked one message and physically staggered. My company's stock just dropped 3%, he whispered, more to himself than anyone around him. The market is reacting to rumors about the Neurotech contract. Murray, ever the observer of human behavior, noted this with academic interest. Fascinating how quickly financial markets incorporate social media narratives into valuation models. Your company's relationship with Neurotech is clearly priced into your stock. This academic observation did nothing to comfort Blackwood, who was watching his career implode in real time through his smartphone screen. A notification from LinkedIn showed that his company's CEO had just published a statement. Nexus Solutions is aware of an incident involving one of our executives. We are investigating the matter and will take appropriate action. The reported behavior does not reflect our company's values of respect and inclusivity. The public distancing had begun. Corporate damage control mechanisms activating to protect the organization at the expense of the individual. Kevin Wright continued his live updates from across the terminal. Emerging details suggest the damaged device contained proprietary technology being developed for children with learning disabilities. Sources close to Neurotech confirm the app represents significant intellectual property. #IPadJustice, #Accessibility Matters. This new angle, the accessibility dimension, created another surge in engagement, as disability advocates began amplifying the story with their own perspectives. This incident highlights the ongoing struggle for accessible technology. One executive's arrogance nearly destroyed tools that could help thousands of children with learning differences. #Accessibility Matters. Jordan, still monitoring the online reaction on Dr. Murray's phone, looked up at his father. People are really connecting with the accessibility aspect of Navigate Ease. There are lots of comments from parents of kids with dyslexia. Marcus nodded thoughtfully. Perhaps some good can come from this situation after all. Increased awareness about accessibility needs is always valuable. As they spoke, A local news crew had set up at the edge of the terminal, a reporter doing a stand-up segment with occasional glances in their direction. The story was transitioning from social media phenomenon to mainstream news coverage, acquiring additional institutional weight with each expansion of its audience. Blackwood watched this escalation with growing horror, understanding that the incident was no longer contained or controllable. What had begun as a moment of arrogance in the artificial hierarchy of an airplane cabin had expanded into a public narrative about privilege, respect, and consequences that would follow him indefinitely. His phone rang again, his CEO's direct line. He answered immediately. "James, I can explain." The voice on the other end cut him off. "The board is convening an emergency session. Richard, CNN just called our press office. This has gone beyond a personal incident. It's now a corporate crisis. Neurotech's stock is up 2 points while ours is falling. The market is already pricing in the loss of the Martinez contract." "I'm headed to meet with Thomas now," Blackwood replied desperately. "I can still fix this." "For your sake, I hope so," his CEO replied without warmth. "Because right now, #FireBlackwood is trending in business circles." As he ended the call, Amanda approached. "Mr. Blackwood, the car is ready to take you to Neurotech headquarters. The board is waiting." With social media continuing to explode around him, transforming his momentary arrogance into a permanent digital record viewed by hundreds of thousands, Blackwood followed her toward the exit, each step taking him further into the consequences of his actions. Behind him, Kevin Wright captured his departure with one final update. Blackwood headed to Neurotech HQ for emergency board meeting. Sources say $3.7 billion contract hangs in balance. Stay tuned for updates. #IPADjustice, #corporate accountability. Blackwood's mounting horror. The sleek black corporate sedan moved through San Francisco traffic with efficient purpose, its tinted windows shielding Richard Blackwood from public view while offering no protection from his mounting internal panic. Seated in the back beside Amanda from Neurotech, he stared at his phone in disbelief as his professional life disintegrated in real time. Nexus Solutions stock down 4.7%. Trading volume triple daily average. Analysts questioning Martinez contract status. Each notification hammered another nail into the coffin of his career. Amanda maintained professional detachment, focused on her tablet as she occasionally relayed updates to Neurotech headquarters. "The board is assembled in Conference Room A. They've requested all documentation from the incident be presented upon your arrival." Blackwood loosened his tie, which suddenly felt constricting against his throat. "Is Mr. Thomas already there?" he asked, clinging to the formality of corporate protocols, even as his professional standing collapsed around him. "CEO Thomas will be joining shortly," Amanda replied. "He's ensuring his son's project data is properly secured before addressing business matters." The prioritization spoke volumes. Marcus Thomas, despite leading a multi-billion-dollar corporation, had placed his son's well-being and work above immediate business concerns. The contrast with Blackwood's own behavior on the flight couldn't have been more stark. His phone rang again. The screen displayed Ryan's school, his nephew's specialized learning center. With trembling fingers, he answered. "Hello, Mr. Blackwood. This is Dr. Patel from Westlake Academy. I'm calling because Ryan mentioned you might be speaking with Neurotech about their new accessibility software. We've been following their development work closely and would be very interested in participating in any beta testing." The innocent timing of the call was almost cruel. There's been a complication, though," Blackwood managed. "I'll have to call you back." "Oh, sir," Patel sounded disappointed. "Well, please do. Their voice command interface could be revolutionary for students like Ryan. The current technology options are quite limited." As he ended the call, the full weight of what he had done crashed down upon him. He hadn't just damaged an iPad or insulted a child he had potentially delayed or damaged technology that could have helped his own nephew and thousands of children like him. 5 minutes to headquarters," Amanda announced, her tone professional but cool. "The security team has been briefed to escort you directly to the boardroom." "Security escort," Blackwood repeated weakly. "Is that really necessary?" "Standard protocol for non-employees attending emergency board sessions," Amanda replied, though something in her expression suggested this wasn't entirely accurate. The car turned into the imposing entrance of Neurotech's San Francisco headquarters, a gleaming glass and steel structure overlooking the bay. The building's modern facade had featured in countless business magazines as an example of innovative corporate architecture. Today, it loomed like a judgment. As they pulled up to the executive entrance, Blackwood's phone buzzed with a text from James. His CEO, CNN Business, just ran segment on incident, identified you by name, board chairman calling for updates every 15 minutes. Fix this. Accompanying the message was a link to a news clip. With shaking fingers, Blackwood tapped it open. The headline made him physically recoil. Executive destroys child's disability, app on flight, Neurotech reconsidering $3. B, partnership. The video showed airport footage of him being escorted to the car, looking shaken and disheveled. The reporter's voiceover was damning. Sources close to Neurotech confirmed that Richard Blackwood, vice president of marketing at Nexus Solutions, deliberately damaged proprietary technology belonging to Jordan Thomas, son of Neurotech CEO Marcus Thomas. The damaged device contained specialized accessibility software designed to help children with learning disabilities. We've arrived, Amanda announced, closing her tablet as the car stopped. Please follow me directly to the boardroom. As promised, 2 security personnel in Neurotech uniforms stood waiting at the entrance. Their expressions were professionally neutral, but their presence transformed what should have been a standard business meeting into something that felt uncomfortably like a disciplinary escort. The sleek lobby of Neurotech headquarters would normally have impressed Blackwood with its cutting-edge design and technology displays. Today, he noticed none of it, focused only on the increasingly dire messages flooding his phone and the physical symptoms of stress gripping his body, clammy palms, racing heartbeat, constricted breathing. As they entered the elevator, Amanda pressed her badge against the security panel. Executive floor, she stated clearly. The elevator responded instantly, whisking them upward with smooth efficiency. Is there anything I should know before the meeting? Blackwood asked desperately, searching for any advantage or preparation that might salvage the situation. Just be truthful, Amanda replied simply. The board has already reviewed the initial evidence, including video from multiple passengers and the official airline incident report. The elevator doors opened to reveal an elegant executive floor that contrasted sharply with the modern industrial aesthetic of the main lobby. Here, warm wood tones and subtle lighting created an atmosphere of thoughtful calm, the environment where billion-dollar decisions were made daily. A plaque beside a massive conference room door read, Thomas Innovation Center, the eponymous boardroom name for the company's founder and current CEO. Blackwood stared at it, the name now carrying entirely different associations than it had that morning. They're waiting inside, Amanda gestured toward the door. I'll announce you. As she opened the door, Blackwood caught his first glimpse of Neurotech's assembled leadership, 12 executives seated around a massive table, tablets and documents arranged before them. At the head of the table was an empty chair, presumably reserved for Marcus Thomas. On the wall-mounted screens, multiple displays showed distressing information, video clips from the airplane incident, Nexus Solutions' stock performance declining sharply, and what appeared to be contingency planning documents for the Martinez educational contract. Mr. Richard Blackwood, Vice President of Marketing, Nexus Solutions, Amanda announced formally. Every head turned toward him, expressions ranging from professional neutrality to barely concealed disapproval. The collective judgment of these technology leaders, people who controlled billions in market capital and influenced global technological development, hit him with physical force. Robert Chen, Neurotech's chief operating officer, spoke first. Mr. Blackwood, please join us. We have much to discuss regarding today's incident and its implications for our company's relationship. Blackwood moved woodenly to the indicated seat directly opposite the CEO's empty chair, positioning him to face Marcus Thomas when he arrived. The symbolism wasn't lost on him. As you're aware, Chen continued once Blackwood was seated, Neurotech and Nexus Solutions have been negotiating a distribution partnership for our educational technology suite, with particular focus on the Martinez Accessibility Initiative. Today's incident has raised serious concerns about alignment of corporate values. On the screens, video footage from the airplane played silently, Blackwood's contemptuous expression clearly visible as he deliberately stepped on Jordan's iPad. The high-definition clarity of the security cameras left no room for ambiguity about the intentional nature of the action. Before we proceed further, another board member interjected, we should note that this meeting is being recorded as part of our corporate governance procedures. Do you consent to this recording, Mr. Blackwood? The formality of the request highlighted the serious nature of the meeting. This wasn't a casual discussion, but an official proceeding with potential legal implications. Yes, Blackwood managed, his mouth dry. His phone vibrated again in his pocket. A discreet glance showed a message from his company's legal department. Do not admit fault. Corporate counsel en route to Neurotech HQ. Stall until arrival. This legal advice collided with Blackwood's dawning recognition that honesty might be his only path to potential redemption. The professional calculation weighing legal liability against moral responsibility paralyzed him momentarily. Mr. Blackwood, Chen prompted, the board is particularly concerned with reports that you made derogatory comments with racial undertones during this incident. Can you address these allegations? Before Blackwood could formulate a response, the door opened again. Marcus Thomas entered, now dressed in a tailored blazer over his casual attire, the perfect hybrid of approachable founder and commanding CEO. The room's energy shifted immediately, executives straightening in their chairs as the company's visionary leader took his place. Thank you all for assembling on short notice. Marcus addressed the board, taking his seat at the head of the table. His gaze finally settled on Blackwood, neither hostile nor sympathetic, but evaluative. Mr. Blackwood, I appreciate your presence here today. I believe in addressing situations directly, rather than through intermediaries. Blackwood nodded, unable to find his voice as the full weight of the situation crushed down upon him. This man, whom he had dismissed and disrespected hours earlier, now literally held his professional fate in his hands. Before we continue, Marcus said, I want to update the board on Jordan's project. The technical team has successfully recovered approximately 95% of this morning's work. The voice command module for users with severe dyslexia can proceed to beta testing as scheduled. Relief visibly washed through the room, a reminder that beyond corporate contracts and stock prices, actual human needs were at stake. The technology Jordan had been developing wasn't merely a product, but a tool to improve lives. Now, Marcus turned his full attention to Blackwood. Let's discuss the implications of today's incident for our company's relationship. As Blackwood stared across the table at Marcus Thomas, the man he had dismissed hours earlier as unimportant, the full magnitude of his situation finally hit him with crushing force. His entire career, his company's financial future, and a groundbreaking accessibility initiative hung in the balance, jeopardized by a moment of arrogance that could no longer be undone. Marcus's leadership. Before we address the business implications, Marcus began, his voice measured and calm. I want to be clear about my priorities in this situation. He looked directly at Blackwood, his gaze steady. My first concern is my son, not just the damage to his device, but the message sent by how he was treated. My second concern is the educational technology that helps children like your nephew. Mr. Blackwood, the business relationship between our companies comes third. The boardroom fell silent. This clear articulation of priorities, placing human concerns before corporate interests, set a tone that shifted the entire dynamic of the meeting. That said, Marcus continued, I believe in teaching through example rather than punishment. Jordan is watching how I handle this situation. The lessons he takes from today will shape his understanding of leadership, accountability, and forgiveness. Robert Chen, the COO, leaned forward slightly. Marcus, the markets are already reacting to news of the incident. We should address the contract situation immediately. The markets will do what markets run. Marcus replied with the confidence of someone who had weathered many financial storms. Our decisions should be guided by our values, not by short-term stock fluctuations. He turned his attention back to Blackwood. Mr. Blackwood, I'd like to hear your perspective on what happened today, not your justification or defense, but your honest understanding of the situation. Blackwood's phone vibrated again in his pocket, undoubtedly another warning from legal counsel not to admit fault. He ignored it, recognizing that this moment called for truth rather than corporate maneuvering. He began and then stopped, swallowed hard, and started again. I behaved inexcusably. I made assumptions based on appearances, treated your son with disrespect, and deliberately damaged his property when I thought there would be no meaningful consequences. The admission hung in the air, its honesty somehow more powerful than any carefully crafted statement could have been. When I learned who you were, Blackwood continued, My immediate concern was for the business implications rather than the harm I had caused. That reveals something about my character that I'm not proud of. Marcus nodded, his expression thoughtful rather than triumphant. Recognition is the first step toward change. The question now is, what happens next? He turned to address the board. I've reviewed the Martinez contract situation thoroughly. Nexus Solutions has the distribution network our educational technology needs to reach children in underserved communities. The question we need to answer is whether this incident reflects their corporate culture or represents an individual failing. A board member spoke up. The company's initial statement distanced themselves from Mr. Blackwood's actions. Their CEO has requested an emergency meeting with you tomorrow morning. I'm aware, Marcus replied, and I'll take that meeting, but I'm more interested in substantive change than in damage control statements. He turned back to Blackwood. Your company's diversity and inclusion policies look impressive on paper, Mr. Blackwood, but today's incident suggests a gap between published values and lived behavior. How would you address that? It was a masterful question, not attacking Blackwood personally, but challenging him to think systemically about the culture he represented. The shift from individual blame to structural responsibility created space for constructive dialogue rather than defensive posturing. Blackwood considered the question carefully, aware that his answer would reveal much about his capacity for growth. Our policies are thorough, but perhaps performative, he admitted finally. We conduct required training sessions and publish appropriate statements, but we don't consistently model inclusive behavior in our daily operations. Marcus nodded approvingly at the honest assessment. That's a valuable insight. What would meaningful change look like? For the first time since the incident began, Blackwood felt himself on somewhat familiar professional ground analyzing systems and proposing solutions. We would need to move beyond compliance-focused training to behavior-centered accountability, starting with leadership modeling and extending through hiring practices, promotion criteria, and client relationships. As he spoke, Blackwood's professional expertise began to emerge from beneath the shame of his actions. His marketing background included significant experience with corporate messaging and culture development, areas directly relevant to the discussion. The gap between stated values and actual behavior, he continued with growing confidence, often results from rewarding results without examining methods. Our compensation structures and promotion practices don't currently account for how goals are achieved, only that they are achieved. Marcus leaned back slightly, his expression showing genuine interest in this analysis. That's insightful, Mr. Blackwood. It suggests you have the professional capacity to address these issues, even if your personal behavior today didn't reflect that understanding. The observation was both acknowledgement of Blackwood's professional competence and clear-eyed assessment of his personal failing, neither dismissing him entirely nor excusing his actions. What would you propose as a path forward? Marcus asked, extending an unexpected opportunity for Blackwood to contribute to the solution rather than merely accept punishment. Blackwood's phone vibrated yet again. Legal counsel undoubtedly arrived and demanding to join the meeting. Again, he ignored it, recognizing that this moment called for authentic engagement rather than legal protection. 3 specific actions, Blackwood replied after careful consideration. First, a comprehensive review of how our stated values translate into operational behaviors, conducted by an independent third party with expertise in organizational culture. Second, revision of our performance metrics to explicitly include behavioral standards alongside business results. Third, a personal commitment from me to work directly with accessibility advocates to better understand the needs of users like your son is trying to help. The board members exchanged glances, clearly impressed by the substantive nature of these proposals. They weren't merely performative apologies, but actionable steps toward meaningful change. Marcus nodded thoughtfully. Those are constructive suggestions, Mr. Blackwood. They address both individual and systemic dimensions of the situation. He turned to address the entire board. I propose the following resolution. We will proceed with the Martinez contract discussions with Nexus Solutions, contingent upon implementation of the reforms Mr. Blackwood has outlined, plus 2 additional conditions. The board members leaned forward attentively, recognizing that their CEO was crafting a thoughtful response rather than a reactive punishment. First, Marcus continued, Nexus Solutions will partner with our accessibility team to develop comprehensive inclusivity training, With Mr. Blackwood personally participating in the curriculum development and delivery, Blackwood nodded, understanding that this condition represented both accountability and opportunity, requiring him to directly engage with the values he had violated while also leveraging his professional skills constructively. Second, Marcus said, Jordan's Navigate-Ease application will be prioritized in the initial deployment phase of the Martinez Initiative, with particular focus on reaching children with dyslexia and related learning differences. This condition cleverly tied Blackwood's redemption directly to advancing the very technology he had nearly damaged, creating a symmetry of restoration rather than punishment. Are these terms acceptable to you, Mr. Blackwood? Marcus asked directly. Before Blackwood could respond, his phone rang rather than vibrated an emergency override setting that indicated his CEO was calling directly. He glanced at Marcus, who nodded permission to answer. James, Blackwood answered, keeping his voice low. His CEO's voice was tense. Legal counsel is in the lobby. They're being denied access to the meeting. What's happening in there? Our stock is down 6 points and falling. Blackwood looked across the table at Marcus, who was waiting patiently, then made a decision that would define the remainder of his career. I'm resolving the situation directly. James, no legal counsel needed. I'll call you back with details. He ended the call despite his CEO's protests, returning his full attention to Marcus. The terms are more than fair. They're redemptive. I accept them completely. Marcus held his gaze for a long moment, then nodded once, apparently satisfied with what he saw. Good. I believe in second chances, Mr. Blackwood, not because people deserve them, but because growth requires them. He turned to the board. We'll proceed with the Martinez contract negotiations as planned. With the conditions noted, Amanda will draft the appropriate amendments to the agreement. The tension in the room visibly eased to $7 billion partnership salvaged not through legal maneuvering or public relations damage control, but through authentic dialogue and meaningful accountability. Marcus stood, signaling the meeting's conclusion. Mr. Blackwood, I suggest you return to your office to brief your leadership team on our discussion. Amanda will coordinate the next steps regarding the training development and Navigate-Ease integration. As the board members began gathering their materials, Marcus added one final thought. Jordan asked me to tell you that he's still willing to include your nephew in the beta testing program. He believes every child deserves access to tools that help them learn, regardless of their family connections. This simple message, the generous spirit of a child whom Blackwood had dismissed and demeaned, landed with more impact than any corporate penalty could have. It revealed the fundamental character gap between Jordan's innate compassion and Blackwood's conditional respect. Thank you, Blackwood managed, genuinely moved by the offer. Ryan would benefit tremendously from that opportunity. As the meeting concluded and Blackwood prepared to face the cascading consequences awaiting him back at Nexus Solutions, he understood that Marcus Thomas had demonstrated more than corporate leadership. He had provided a masterclass in human leadership. Rather than leveraging his power to punish, Marcus had created a path toward genuine growth. Rather than dismissing Blackwood entirely for a grievous mistake, he had established conditions for redemption through meaningful action. And most importantly, he had centered the entire resolution not on corporate interests or personal revenge, but on advancing the technology that would help vulnerable children. It was leadership that transformed mistakes into opportunities, punishment into growth, and conflict into collaboration, precisely the lesson Jordan had been watching his father teach. Part 4, the transformation. The private jet bridge connecting Flight 783 to San Francisco International's Terminal 3 had become an impromptu command center. Airline executives, neurotech personnel, and security staff moved with coordinated purpose, transforming what should have been a routine deplaning into a carefully orchestrated response to the incident aboard. Marcus Thomas stood at the center of this controlled chaos, one hand resting protectively on Jordan's shoulder as technical staff secured the damaged iPad and began immediate data recovery procedures. His calm demeanor belied the significance of the situation unfolding around them. The cloud backup from this morning has been successfully accessed, reported Amanda Chen, Neurotech's Senior Director of Operations. Dr. Rodriguez confirms that the core algorithm architecture is intact, though this morning's optimization code will require reconstruction. Jordan nodded, his expression serious but composed. The voice command syntax tree was the critical breakthrough. If that's recoverable, We can rebuild the optimization parameters. Nearby, airline security personnel were completing their formal documentation, photographing the damaged device from multiple angles before it was transferred to Neurotech's recovery team. The methodical process transformed what might have been dismissed as a minor incident into an official case with institutional weight. Mr. Thomas approached David Wilson, the airline's customer service manager. Our executive team has been fully briefed. The CEO is requesting a direct conversation at your earliest convenience. Thank you, Marcus replied. Please let him know I'll call once we've secured Jordan's work. That's my first priority at the moment. This consistent prioritization placing his son's needs above corporate concerns, despite the billions at stake, had not gone unnoticed by the assembled staff. It set a tone that influenced every aspect of the response. As the recovery team departed with Jordan's damaged iPad, Marcus turned his attention to the broader situation. What's the status with Mr. Blackwood? He asked Amanda. He's being transported to headquarters now, she reported efficiently. The board has assembled in conference room A. Legal has prepared preliminary documentation regarding the potential impact on the Martinez contract negotiations. Marcus nodded thoughtfully. Let's ensure this is handled as a teaching moment, not merely punitive action. Jordan is watching how we respond. This simple observation, acknowledging his son as an observer of adult behavior, rather than merely its object, reflected the thoughtful parenting that had shaped Jordan's remarkable composure throughout the incident. Airport security approached with professional deference. Mr. Thomas, we've been informed by Transcontinental Airlines that this incident involves potential criminal damage to property. Would you like to pursue formal charges? Marcus considered this carefully, glancing at Jordan. What do you think, son? It's your property and work that was damaged. Jordan thought for a moment, his young face serious beyond his years. I think formal charges would just make everything more complicated without fixing anything. If he pays for the iPad and helps make sure kids get access to the app, that seems like a better outcome. Marcus smiled slightly, pride evident in his expression. I agree. We'll handle this through appropriate corporate channels rather than criminal prosecution. The security officer nodded, noting this decision in his report. Understood, sir. We'll document the incident fully, but defer to your preference regarding charges. As they moved through the terminal toward the VIP exit, Dr. Murray approached once more. Mr. Thomas, I want to offer my contact information for any follow-up documentation you might need. As an uninvolved third party, my observations may be useful. Thank you, Dr. Murray, Marcus replied. Your willingness to speak up made a significant difference today. It shouldn't require courage to simply tell the truth, she noted. But unfortunately, that's often the case in situations involving power imbalances. This observation hung in the air as they continued toward the exit, where a sleek corporate vehicle waited to transport them to Neurotech headquarters. As they approached, a commotion near the main terminal entrance caught their attention. News crews had assembled, cameras and microphones at the ready. A reporter was already delivering a live stand-up report, the airline's logo visible in the background. Sources confirmed that an executive from Nexus Solutions allegedly damaged property belonging to the son of Neurotech CEO Marcus Thomas during Transcontinental Airlines Flight 783 from Chicago. Neurotech and Nexus have been in negotiations regarding a multi-billion-dollar educational technology partnership. The story was already transitioning from private incident to public narrative, acquiring additional dimensions with each retelling. Jordan watched the news crew with analytical interest. How long until they identify Mr. Blackwood by name, he asked, demonstrating his understanding of how these stories typically unfolded. Probably within the hour, Marcus replied honestly. Once they connect him to the Martinez contract negotiations, identifying him will be simple, as if confirming this assessment. Marcus's phone chimed with an urgent message. He checked it briefly. Nexus Solutions CEO James Harrison is requesting an emergency meeting. Their stock is already responding to market rumors about the contract status. Amanda made a note on her tablet. Shall I schedule him for tomorrow morning? Yes, Marcus confirmed. And please ensure our PR team understands that our public statements should focus on the technology rather than the incident. The Navigatee's application and its benefits for children with learning differences should be the primary narrative. This directive, emphasizing constructive outcomes rather than personal conflict, reflected Marcus's consistent leadership approach. Even amid justified anger over his son's treatment, he remained focused on the broader mission. As they reached the vehicle, Jordan paused, looking back at the terminal thoughtfully. "Dad, do you think Mr. Blackwood understood what he was really damaging? Not just an iPad, but something that could help kids like his nephew." "I doubt it," Marcus replied honestly. "People often see what they expect to see rather than what's actually before them. He saw a child with the device and assumed it was trivial because he couldn't imagine you creating something significant." Jordan nodded, processing this insight. "That's why the app is so important. It helps people see beyond their first assumptions." This profound observation from an 11-year-old demonstrated the empathetic intelligence that had driven his technological innovation, creating tools that bridged understanding rather than merely facilitating tasks. As they settled into the vehicle, Marcus received another urgent notification. "The technical team has completed their initial assessment. They've recovered approximately 87% of your morning's work, including the core voice command architecture." Jordan's face lit up with genuine relief. "That's the most important part. The optimization parameters are easier to reconstruct if the fundamental command structure is intact." "Dr. Rodriguez is personally overseeing the recovery effort," Amanda added. "She says the breakthrough components are secure and the beta testing timeline can proceed as scheduled." This confirmation that Jordan's work could continue as planned visibly eased some of the tension he had been carrying since the incident. Technology could be repaired, code could be recovered, the mission to help other children remained on track. As the vehicle pulled away from the terminal, Marcus's phone rang again. Neurotech's board chairman requesting updates on both the technology recovery and the contract implications. "Robert," Marcus answered, his voice calm and assured. "Yes, Jordan's work has been largely recovered. The Navigate Ease beta testing will proceed on schedule." He listened for a moment. "No, I don't believe punitive action against Nexus Solutions serves our mission. We have an opportunity to transform this incident into meaningful change that benefits the children we're trying to serve." This perspective, focusing on mission impact rather than retribution, reflected the value-centered leadership that had built Neurotech into a technology leader while maintaining its human-centered approach. As they moved through San Francisco traffic toward Neurotech headquarters, the wheels of corporate, media, and technological response continued turning, transforming a moment of conflict into cascading consequences that would ultimately reshape relationships, policies, and priorities across multiple organizations. Marcus ended his call and turned to Jordan. "The recovery team will meet us at headquarters with the reconstructed code. They want you to review the voice command architecture personally to ensure nothing critical was lost." Jordan nodded, already mentally preparing for the technical work ahead. His resilience throughout the incident, maintaining focus on his project's purpose, despite the personal attack, demonstrated a maturity beyond his years. "What happens with Mr. Blackwood now?" he asked, his concern not vindictive, but genuinely curious about consequences and accountability. "That depends partly on him," Marcus replied thoughtfully. "On whether he sees this as a PR problem to manage or an opportunity to grow. True transformation comes from within, not from external punishment." This wisdom, focusing on genuine change rather than mere compliance, would shape every aspect of the resolution that followed, creating space for redemption rather than simply demanding penance. Corporate consequences. The glass-walled conference room at Nexus Solutions headquarters had transformed into a crisis command center. Executives and legal counsel huddled around the polished table, expressions grim as they monitored real-time market data on wall-mounted screens. The stock ticker displayed an alarming red NXSL 8.4%. James Harrison, CEO of Nexus Solutions, paced at the head of the table, his normally confident demeanor replaced by barely controlled panic. 8% in 90 minutes. That's nearly $200 million in market valuation. Gone. The company's general counsel, Victoria Ramirez, reviewed urgent reports on her tablet. CNN Business has now identified Richard by name. Social media engagement is approaching viral thresholds. Hashtag boycott Nexus Solutions is trending in 3 major markets. "Where the hell is Blackwood?" Harrison demanded, checking his watch for the 5th time in as many minutes. His last message said he was resolving the situation directly with Thomas. That was 40 minutes ago. As if summoned by the question, the conference room door opened. Richard Blackwood entered, his appearance noticeably disheveled compared to his usual meticulous presentation. The room fell silent as executives turned to face the man whose actions had triggered the company's most significant crisis in years. "Well," Harrison demanded without preamble, "what happened is the Martinez contract salvageable?" Blackwood took a deep breath. "The contract discussions will proceed with conditions." A collective exhale of relief swept through the room, though Harrison's expression remained tense. "What conditions? Did you sign anything? Tell me legal was present." "I declined legal representation," Blackwood replied, causing the company's attorneys to exchange alarmed glances. This wasn't a situation that called for legal maneuvering. It required accountability. "Accountability," Harrison repeated incredulously. "Your job was to protect the company's interests, not fall on your sword. We have a fiduciary responsibility to shareholders who are watching their investments plummet as we speak." Blackwood met his CEO's gaze directly. "With respect, James, my actions aboard that flight violated every value this company claims to uphold. Attempting to hide behind legal shields would only have confirmed that our stated commitment to inclusivity is merely performative." This assessment, clinical and accurate, created uncomfortable silence around the table. Several executives shifted in their seats, avoiding eye contact. "So what exactly did you agree to?" Ramirez asked. "Legal pad ready to document potential liabilities. 3 conditions for proceeding with the Martinez contract," Blackwood replied. "First, an independent review of how our stated values translate into operational behaviors, with particular focus on inclusivity and accessibility. Second, revision of our performance metrics to explicitly include behavioral standards alongside business results. Third, prioritization of the Navigate Ease application in our initial deployment phase, with specific focus on reaching children with dyslexia." Harrison processed these terms with narrowed eyes. "That's it. No punitive damages, no public apology campaign. There are 2 personal conditions as well," Blackwood continued. "I will partner with Neurotech's accessibility team to develop comprehensive inclusivity training, participating directly in curriculum development and delivery, and I've been instructed to brief the board on implementation progress at quarterly intervals." The corporate counsel made rapid notes. "These terms are surprisingly reasonable, given the circumstances. Thomas could have demanded your termination or withdrawn from negotiations entirely." Harrison studied Blackwood with calculation rather than anger. "So the $7 billion partnership remains intact, contingent on these operational adjustments and your personal involvement in their implementation." "Yes," Blackwood confirmed. Marcus Thomas was remarkably measured in his response. He focused on systemic improvement rather than personal retribution. "Well, that's something," Harrison acknowledged, though his relief was clearly tempered by ongoing concerns. "But the PR damage remains significant. We need to issue a formal statement immediately addressing your actions and outlining specific remedial steps." As the corporate machinery shifted from crisis management to damage control, Blackwood's phone chimed with an incoming email. The sender, Ryan School, brought him up short. The message was simple. "Mr. Blackwood, Dr. Patel here. We just received word that Ryan has been offered a place in Neurotech's Navigate Ease beta testing program. This is an extraordinary opportunity that could significantly impact his learning journey. Please call at your earliest convenience to discuss." The timing was no coincidence. Jordan Thomas had kept his word, extending help to Blackwood's nephew despite the earlier humiliation. The gesture's generosity momentarily overwhelmed him, creating a stark contrast between the child's compassion and his own earlier contempt. "Richard," Harrison prompted, recalling him to the crisis at hand, "marketing needs your input on the public statement. We need to get ahead of this narrative before it defines us completely." Blackwood looked up from his phone, a subtle but significant shift having occurred in his expression. "I want to propose a different approach," he said quietly. "Instead of the standard corporate apology playbook, what if we demonstrated actual accountability, not just damage control, but genuine transformation?" The suggestion was met with skeptical looks around the table. "What exactly are you suggesting?" Harrison asked cautiously. "That we acknowledge exactly what happened, without corporate euphemisms or passive voice constructions that obscure responsibility," Blackwood replied. "That we outline specific, measurable changes to our operations rather than vague commitments to do better." That we recognize this incident as symptomatic of broader cultural issues rather than dismissing it as an isolated occurrence. The company's PR director, Michael Torres, looked up from his draft statement with evident concern. That approach carries significant short-term risks. Markets respond better to contained narratives than to open-ended accountability processes. Perhaps that's precisely the problem, Blackwood observed. We've prioritized market perception over substantive change for so long that our value statements have become meaningless. Today made that painfully clear. Harrison studied his marketing VP with newfound consideration. You're suggesting we take a reputational hit now in service of longer-term credibility. I'm suggesting that authentic transformation might ultimately prove more valuable than effective damage control, Blackwood clarified. Neurotech built its market position on genuine commitment to accessibility and inclusion. Maybe there's a business lesson there beyond the moral one. A thoughtful silence fell over the conference room as executives considered this unorthodox approach. The wall-mounted screens continued displaying alarming metrics, stock price declines, social media sentiment analysis, market analyst downgrades, but somehow these immediate indicators seemed less consequential in light of Blackwood's perspective shift. Draft both approaches, Harrison finally decided. The standard damage control statement in this accountability version, we'll review them side by side before making a final decision. As the meeting shifted to tactical response planning, Blackwood's phone buzzed with another notification, a message from Marcus Thomas himself. Jordan asked me to check whether your nephew Ryan would be available to begin beta testing next week. The voice command module is ready for initial user evaluation. The contrast between this gracious outreach and his own behavior aboard the flight struck Blackwood with renewed force. The people he had dismissed and demeaned were now extending professional courtesy and practical assistance, demonstrating the character gap that had been exposed at 30,000 feet. One more thing, Blackwood addressed the room, interrupting a detailed discussion of media talking points. I want to formally request a company matching contribution to Neurotech's accessibility initiative. Every dollar we invest in making their educational technology more widely available, the company matches. Harrison raised an eyebrow. You're proposing we donate to Neurotech after this incident. I'm proposing we invest in technology that helps children like my nephew, Blackwood clarified. And yes, that it comes partially from my personal compensation as a tangible demonstration that this isn't merely corporate theater. The suggestion, specific, measurable, and personally costly, shifted the energy in the room. This wasn't the defensive posturing of an executive protecting his position, but something more authentic. Draft the proposal, Boeing, Harrison agreed after a moment's consideration, included in the board briefing packet for tomorrow's emergency session. As the meeting continued, Blackwood found himself viewing his company through new eyes, seeing the gap between stated values and operational realities that had previously been invisible to him. The transformation that had begun aboard Flight 783 was continuing, reshaping not just his personal perspective, but potentially his entire organization's approach to corporate responsibility. His phone buzzed again, this time with a news alert. CNN Business was reporting breaking news. Neurotech announces accelerated release of Navigate, Ease accessibility software, Nexus solutions to manage educational distribution. The positive announcement, focusing on the technology's benefits rather than the conflict, demonstrated Marcus Thomas's leadership approach once again. Rather than centering the narrative on Blackwood's failing, he had redirected attention to the constructive outcome technology that would help vulnerable children learn more effectively. As Nexus Solutions continued its crisis response, the contrast between reactive damage control and proactive value creation had never been clearer. And Richard Blackwood, watching the corporate machinery in motion, understood that true transformation would require not just different words, but fundamentally different priorities, exactly the lesson that had been painfully delivered at 30,000 feet above the American Midwest. Jordan's resilience. The technical recovery lab at Neurotech headquarters hummed with focused activity. Multiple screens displayed fragments of code being meticulously reconstructed, while specialized hardware extracted data from Jordan's damaged iPad. At the center of this technological rescue operation sat Jordan himself, perched on an ergonomic chair that had been adjusted to accommodate his smaller frame, his attention fixed on the primary display. The voice command syntax tree is mostly intact, reported Dr. Elena Rodriguez. Neurotech's chief technology officer and one of the world's foremost experts in accessibility software. We've recovered approximately 94% of the morning's work, with particular success in the pattern recognition algorithms. Jordan nodded, his eyes scanning the reconstructed code with remarkable comprehension for an 11-year-old. The dyslexia-specific voice commands are the critical component. Those were the breakthrough elements that would allow users to navigate standard applications without struggling with text-based menus. Dr. Rodriguez watched with undisguised admiration as Jordan identified specific sections requiring attention. The natural language processing module needs some reconstruction here, he noted, pointing to a section of code. I was implementing a more flexible syntax interpretation for users with irregular speech patterns. The technical team followed his guidance without question, treating him not as a child but as a valued colleague whose expertise was essential to the recovery effort. This respect earned through demonstrated competence rather than assumed authority created a collaborative atmosphere despite the circumstances that had necessitated the recovery work. Marcus observed from nearby, allowing Jordan space to direct the technical process while remaining available for support if needed. His parenting approach, neither hovering nor distant, had clearly fostered Jordan's remarkable self-efficacy and resilience. "Jordan," called Amanda from the doorway, "there's someone here who would like to speak with you if you have a moment." Jordan looked up from the code, glancing at his father, who nodded encouragement. "I can take a break," he decided. "Dr. Rodriguez and the team have the critical sections identified now." As Jordan stepped away from the workstation, Carmen Rodriguez, the flight attendant, whose initial response to the incident had prioritized Blackwood's status over Jordan's truthful account, entered the lab area hesitantly. "Hi," she greeted Jordan softly. "I wanted to apologize for how I handled things on the plane. I didn't take your concerns seriously because—" She paused, clearly uncomfortable with her own realization. "Because you're young, I made assumptions that were unfair and unprofessional." Jordan regarded her thoughtfully, neither immediately accepting nor dismissing her apology. "Why did you believe him instead of me?" he asked, genuine curiosity rather than accusation in his tone. Carmen's discomfort visibly increased, but she answered honestly. "He looked important, with his expensive suit and watch. And you're a kid. I automatically assumed he was right, and you were exaggerating." This simple acknowledgement, recognizing the appearance-based judgment that had influenced her response, seemed to satisfy Jordan. "That's why my app is so important," he observed. "It helps people see beyond their first impressions." The profound connection between his personal experience and his technological mission struck Carmen with visible force. "I never thought about it that way," she admitted. "Technology can help bridge those kinds of biases." "That's the goal," Jordan confirmed. "The voice command system I was developing helps users navigate standard applications without struggling with text, but it also helps developers understand how different people experience the world." This insight that accessibility wasn't merely about accommodating differences, but about expanding understanding reflected the deep empathy that drove Jordan's technical work. "Will you still be able to complete the project?" Carmen asked, genuine concern in her voice. "Yes," Jordan assured her with quiet confidence. "We've recovered most of the code, and I can rebuild the rest. The beta testing will proceed on schedule." His resilience, focusing on moving forward rather than dwelling on the damage done, seemed to affect Carmen deeply. "I'm going to volunteer for our airline's new inclusive service training," she shared. "Today made me realize I have blind spots I wasn't aware of." Jordan smiled, a genuine, warm expression that transformed his serious demeanor. "That's exactly how growth is, recognizing what we didn't see before." This wisdom from an 11-year-old, delivered without condescension or bitterness, demonstrated the character that had remained intact despite Blackwood's attempt to diminish him. As Carmen departed, visibly moved by the encounter, Marcus approached his son. "That was gracious of you," he observed quietly. Jordan shrugged slightly. "She made a mistake and wanted to fix it. That's different from Mr. Blackwood, who only wanted to fix things after he found out who you were." This astute moral distinction between genuine remorse and calculated damage control demonstrated Jordan's emotional intelligence alongside his technical brilliance. "How are you really doing with all of this?" Marcus asked, creating space for his son to express feelings he might have been containing during the technical recovery work. Jordan considered the question seriously. "I was upset when it happened," he admitted. "Not just because of the iPad, but because he assumed I couldn't be doing anything important just because I'm a kid. Marcus nodded understanding, allowing Jordan to process at his own pace. But then, Jordan continued, I realized that's exactly why the app matters so much. People make assumptions about others all the time about kids, about people with learning differences, about anyone who seems different. Navigate Ease helps bridge that gap. This perspective, transforming personal hurt into broader purpose, reflected the values Marcus had clearly modeled throughout his own leadership journey. I also thought about Ryan, Jordan added, referring to Blackwood's nephew with dyslexia. He shouldn't miss out on tools that could help him just because his uncle made a mistake. That's why I suggested including him in the beta testing program, Marcus acknowledged, though it was entirely your decision whether to follow through on that offer. He needs it, Jordan said simply, and maybe seeing how it helps his nephew will help Mr. Blackwood understand why the work matters. This capacity for empathy extending beyond his own experience to consider others' needs demonstrated emotional maturity that many adults never achieved. A technical staff member approached with a tablet displaying reconstructed code. Jordan, we finished the initial recovery of the voice command module. Would you like to review the syntax tree now? Jordan nodded, seamlessly shifting back into his technical role. Yes, let's make sure the phoneme recognition parameters are correctly calibrated for users with articulation challenges. As Jordan returned to the workstation, Dr. Rodriguez addressed Marcus quietly. He's remarkable, not just his technical abilities, which are extraordinary, but his perspective on why the technology matters. Most developers focus on what the code does. Jordan focuses on who it helps. He's always been that way, Marcus replied with quiet pride, seeing connections between people and possibilities. On the main screen, the Navigate Ease interface appeared colorful, intuitive, and designed with careful attention to users with different needs. Jordan began testing voice commands, speaking clearly into a microphone. Navigate Ease, open document, and read aloud. The system responded smoothly, executing the command and beginning to read text with natural intonation. Jordan nodded satisfaction, then deliberately introduced a speech pattern that mimicked common dyslexic articulation challenges. Navigate, open, and read. The system paused momentarily, then successfully interpreted the command despite the hesitations and irregular syntax. Jordan's face lit up with genuine joy at this success, the culmination of months of careful programming. It works, he exclaimed, momentarily just an excited 11-year-old rather than a serious young developer. The pattern recognition algorithm is handling the irregular speech inputs correctly. The technical team broke into spontaneous applause, celebrating not just the successful code recovery, but the breakthrough functionality it represented. This wasn't merely software being repaired, it was accessibility being advanced. Marcus watched with undisguised pride as his son accepted congratulations from the technical team, professionals with advanced degrees and decades of experience treating him as a valued colleague rather than a child prodigy. Jordan's tablet chimed with an incoming message. He checked it briefly, then looked up at his father with a small smile. Ryan's school just confirmed he'll join the beta testing program next week. His reading specialist is really excited about the voice command features. This full circle moment, the nephew of the man who had damaged the device, now becoming a beneficiary of the technology it contained, represented the transformation of conflict into opportunity. Exactly the leadership lesson Marcus had modeled throughout the incident. As the technical team continued refining the recovered code, Jordan's resilience had transformed what could have been a setback into a catalyst accelerating development, raising awareness about accessibility needs, and ultimately advancing the mission that drove his work, creating technology that helped people see beyond their first assumptions. In this moment of technical triumph emerging from personal challenge, Jordan Thomas demonstrated that resilience wasn't merely about recovering from difficulty, but about transforming it into opportunity for growth and positive impact. Broader impact beginnings. The press conference room at San Francisco International Airport buzzed with anticipation. Journalists from major networks and technology publications had assembled with minimal notice, drawn by the viral story that had exploded across social media platforms. Camera operators adjusted equipment while reporters checked their notes, all waiting for the joint announcement from Transcontinental Airlines and Neurotech. At exactly 4:30 p.m., Maria Gonzalez, Transcontinental's Vice President of Customer Experience, approached the podium. Thank you all for joining us on short notice. Today, Transcontinental Airlines is announcing a comprehensive review of our training protocols regarding passenger interactions, with particular focus on eliminating implicit bias from our service delivery. The assembled journalists leaned forward, sensing this was more than standard corporate damage control. Following an incident aboard Flight 783 this morning, Gonzalez continued, we recognize an opportunity to transform our approach to inclusive customer service. Rather than treating this as an isolated occurrence, we're implementing systematic changes to ensure all passengers receive equal respect regardless of age, appearance, or status. Captain James Hernandez joined her at the podium. Effective immediately, Transcontinental is implementing a Respect Every Passenger initiative that will include mandatory quarterly training for all customer-facing staff, revised incident response protocols, and regular third-party evaluation of our service delivery. The announcement specific, measurable, and systemic rather than merely apologetic represented a significant departure from typical corporate crisis responses. Rather than minimizing the incident or offering vague promises to do better, the airline was committing to verifiable change. Additionally, Vice Gonzalez added, we're establishing a partnership with Neurotech's accessibility division to ensure our digital services and in-flight systems accommodate passengers with diverse needs, including those with learning differences and processing challenges. At the mention of Neurotech, the energy in the room visibly intensified. Reporters who had been following the viral story recognized the connection to the incident aboard Flight 783 immediately. Marcus Thomas approached the podium next, his casual attire contrasting with the airline executive's formal business wear. Neurotech is pleased to announce the accelerated release of our Navigate Ease accessibility platform, designed to help users with learning differences navigate standard applications through intuitive interfaces and advanced voice command technology. A slide appeared on the screen behind him, showing the colorful Navigate Ease interface with its simplified navigation system. This technology was developed in collaboration with educational specialists and users with diverse learning needs. Beta testing will begin next week, with particular focus on supporting users with dyslexia and related processing challenges. The deliberate focus on the technology, rather than the conflict that had preceded the announcement, reflected Marcus's consistent approach transforming negative situations into constructive outcomes. We're also announcing a new educational accessibility initiative, Marcus continued, that will provide Navigate Ease technology to under-resourced schools and learning centers at significantly reduced cost. Our goal is to ensure that financial constraints don't prevent any child from accessing tools that support their unique learning journey. A reporter raised her hand. Mr. Thomas, social media reports suggest your son's work on this technology was nearly lost in an incident aboard today's flight. Can you comment on those reports? Marcus addressed the question directly but carefully. My son Jordan is one of the developers working on Navigate Ease. There was an incident today that temporarily affected his development device, but our technical team has successfully recovered the data. The more important story is the technology itself and the children it will help. This redirection acknowledging the incident but refusing to center it in the narrative demonstrated skilled message management that neither denied reality nor allowed it to overshadow the constructive announcement. Another reporter followed up. Is it true that Nexus Solutions executive Richard Blackwood was responsible for damaging your son's device? And has this affected your company's negotiations regarding the Martinez Educational Initiative? Marcus paused, considering his response carefully. What matters most isn't the incident itself, but how we respond to it. Nexus Solutions has committed to meaningful changes in their approach to inclusivity and accessibility, including direct support for making Navigate Ease available to children with learning differences. Our partnership discussions continue with these enhanced commitments. This response, focusing on outcomes rather than blame, created space for redemption rather than merely demanding penance. It also strategically linked Nexus Solutions' future behavior to public commitments that would be difficult to abandon. As the press conference continued, the narrative was skillfully shaped away from personal conflict towards systemic improvement. Each announcement emphasized specific, verifiable changes rather than vague promises. Transcontinental Airlines would implement quarterly bias awareness training for all customer-facing staff, with results measured through blind testing and passenger surveys. Neurotech would accelerate the release of Navigate Ease, with beta testing beginning immediately and focusing on real-world accessibility challenges. A new educational partnership would ensure the technology reached underserved communities rather than being limited to affluent school districts. These tangible commitments transformed what could have been merely a viral moment of conflict into sustainable institutional change with far-reaching implications. Behind the scenes, Jordan was working directly with the technical team on final preparations for the beta testing program. His focus remained steadfastly on the technology rather than the drama surrounding it, ensuring voice commands worked correctly for users with speech articulation challenges, simplifying navigation pathways for those with processing difficulties, and creating customizable interfaces for varying cognitive needs. Meanwhile, at Nexus Solutions headquarters, Richard Blackwood was leading an emergency session with the company's diversity and inclusion team, reviewing training materials with newly critical eyes. These modules are compliance-focused rather than behavior-centered, he noted, identifying the gap between formal training and actual cultural change. We're teaching people what not to say rather than how to actually see and value different perspectives. This insight, recognizing the difference between performative compliance and authentic inclusion, reflected the beginning of genuine transformation, rather than merely damage control. The public consequences of his actions aboard Flight 783 had catalyzed internal reflection that might otherwise have taken years to develop organically. Back at the press conference, a technology reporter raised the broader implications. Mr. Thomas, do you see this situation as representative of larger issues in the tech industry regarding accessibility and inclusion? Marcus nodded thoughtfully. Technology should serve human needs in all their diversity, not just the preferences of those who create it. When we design only for users who think and process information as we do, we create artificial barriers for everyone else. True innovation makes technology more accessible, not more exclusive. This philosophy centering human diversity and technological development resonated beyond the immediate situation, touching on broader questions about Silicon Valley's approach to innovation and accessibility. As the press conference concluded, the hashtag #NavigateEase began trending alongside hashtag #WeIPadJustice, the narrative gradually shifting from conflict to solution. Technology publications were already requesting interviews about the accessibility features, educational applications requesting early access to the platform, and parents of children with learning differences expressing hope about the potential benefits. What had begun as a moment of interpersonal conflict at 30,000 feet was transforming into a catalyst for systemic change across multiple organizations and potentially thousands of users. The incident aboard Flight 783 had revealed existing gaps in corporate practices, airline procedures, and technological priorities gaps that might have remained invisible without the clarifying crisis that exposed them. As Jordan would later observe with wisdom beyond his years, sometimes it takes something breaking to show where things were already broken underneath. Part 5, Systematic Change. The classroom at Westlake Academy for Specialized Learning hummed with focused energy. 14 students with varying learning differences sat at specially designed workstations, each equipped with the latest tablets featuring NavigateEase's beta release. At the front of the room, Jordan Thomas moved between stations, offering guidance and noting user experiences with the careful attention of a dedicated developer. Try speaking the command again, but don't worry about getting all the words perfect. He encouraged Ryan Blackwood, a 14-year-old with severe dyslexia whose frustration was visible as he struggled with the voice interface. The system is designed to understand what you mean, not just what you say. Ryan took a deep breath and tried again. NavigateEase, Open Science Project, and read headings. His speech pattern included several hesitations and slight mispronunciations, challenges typical of his dyslexia profile. The tablet processed for a moment, then successfully executed the command, opening his science assignment and highlighting section headings in contrasting colors for easier navigation. Ryan's expression transformed from tension to relief. It worked. Even though I messed up the words, you didn't mess up, Jordan corrected gently. You speak in your own way, and the system is learning to understand you. That's why we call this adaptive technology. It adapts to you rather than forcing you to adapt to it. This subtle reframing, treating diverse communication styles as valid variations rather than deficiencies to be corrected, reflected the core philosophy behind NavigateEase's development. The technology wasn't designed merely to compensate for differences, but to legitimize and accommodate them. At the back of the classroom, Dr. Patel observed with undisguised admiration. The voice recognition system is revolutionary, she noted to Marcus, who was attending the beta testing session alongside Richard Blackwood. Traditional systems require precise pronunciation and syntax. This actually learns from irregular speech patterns and adapts to the user. Blackwood watched his nephew's interaction with the technology, his expression revealing complex emotions. The boy who had struggled for years with standard educational interfaces was navigating complex content with newfound confidence. The frustration that typically accompanied his learning attempts noticeably reduced. Jordan's algorithm development is extraordinary, Marcus explained. Rather than programming rigid command structures, he created a pattern recognition system that identifies intent through contextual clues. It's actually more sophisticated than many adult-designed voice interfaces. This quiet acknowledgement of his son's genuine brilliance, not as a childish novelty, but as legitimate technical innovation, stood in stark contrast to Blackwood's dismissive attitude aboard Flight 783. The difference in Ryan's engagement is remarkable, Dr. Patel continued. He typically abandons technology interfaces after a few minutes of frustration. He's been working with this system for nearly an hour without a single distress response. Blackwood nodded, clearly moved by this observation. His parents have spent thousands on specialized programs, most of which promised results, but delivered little actual improvement. This is the first system he's genuinely connected with. Across the classroom, Jordan was now assisting a young girl with attention processing challenges, showing her how to customize the interface to reduce distracting elements and highlight essential information. His patient, peer-based approach created a collaborative atmosphere rather than the hierarchical dynamic typical of technology training sessions. We've incorporated Nexus Solutions' educational distribution framework into our deployment plan. Marcus informed Blackwood, your team's experience with school system procurement processes will help ensure Navigate reaches the students who need it most, not just those in well-funded districts. This practical implementation of their revised partnership focusing on complementary strengths rather than punitive conditions demonstrated Marcus's leadership philosophy of transforming conflict into constructive collaboration. Blackwood's phone vibrated with an incoming message from Nexus Solutions headquarters. He checked it briefly, then shared the update. The independent review of our inclusion practices has been scheduled. The consulting firm you recommended has agreed to conduct a comprehensive assessment of our organizational behaviors versus stated values. This systematic evaluation, moving beyond performative diversity statements to measurable behavioral assessment, it represented the beginning of genuine corporate transformation rather than merely crisis management. Meanwhile, at Transcontinental Airlines Training Center across the city, Carmen Rodriguez stood before a classroom of flight attendants, sharing her experience from Flight 783 with unflinching honesty. I made assumptions based on appearances, she acknowledged to her colleagues. I gave greater credibility to the adult in the expensive suit than to the child in casual clothes. That bias affected my professional judgment and violated our responsibility to treat all passengers with equal respect. Patricia Walker, who had been promoted to Director of Crew Training following the incident, nodded approval at Carmen's candor. This is exactly the kind of honest self-assessment our new program requires. We can't address biases we refuse to acknowledge. The Respect Every Passenger initiative had been implemented with remarkable speed, transforming from crisis response announcement to comprehensive training program within 7 days. Rather than treating the incident as an isolated occurrence requiring narrow correction, the airline had recognized it as symptomatic of broader cultural patterns requiring systematic address. Back at Westlake Academy, the beta testing session was concluding. Jordan gathered feedback from each participant, taking detailed notes with the methodical attention of an experienced developer rather than an 11-year-old enthusiast. What worked well for you? He asked Ryan as they reviewed the session. The voice commands actually understood me. Ryan replied, his typical communication hesitancy noticeably reduced when discussing the technology. And when I got stuck, the system offered suggestions instead of just showing an error message. Jordan nodded, noting this feedback carefully. That predictive assistance was based on patterns we observed in early testing. The system recognizes when users are experiencing difficulty and offers context-specific guidance. This design philosophy, proactive assistance, rather than passive error reporting, reflected Jordan's empathetic approach to technology development. The system wasn't merely functional, it was supportive. As the students departed for their next classes, Ryan approached his uncle somewhat hesitantly. "Thanks for getting me into the testing program," he said quietly. "This is the first time computer stuff hasn't made me feel stupid." The simple statement revealing years of accumulated frustration and self-doubt visibly affected Blackwood. "You've never been stupid, Ryan," he replied, placing a supportive hand on his nephew's shoulder. "You just needed technology that recognized your intelligence instead of obscuring it." This insight that accessibility wasn't charity but equity reflected a fundamental shift in Blackwood's understanding of diversity and inclusion. What had previously been abstract corporate values were now embodied in his nephew's experience. Patel joined them, tablet in hand. Ryan's engagement metrics were exceptional, she reported. Task completion, information retention, and frustration indicators all showed significant improvement compared to standard interfaces. "We'd like to continue his participation throughout the beta testing phase, if that's agreeable." "Absolutely," Blackwood confirmed without hesitation. "And I'd like to discuss how Nexus Solutions might support expanding the program to other students at Westlake, perhaps a corporate sponsorship arrangement." This proactive suggestion, moving beyond personal involvement to institutional commitment, demonstrated the beginning of authentic transformation rather than merely performance-based compliance. As they prepared to depart, Marcus approached Blackwood. "The quarterly review board meeting is scheduled for next month. I'd like you to present your progress on the inclusion initiatives we discussed." "Of course," Blackwood agreed. "We've already begun implementing the performance metric revisions. Evaluation criteria now explicitly include behavioral standards alongside business results at all levels of the organization. This systematic change modifying formal accountability structures rather than merely issuing statements or conducting one-time training reflected genuine institutional transformation catalyzed by the incident aboard Flight 783. Jordan joined them, his notebook filled with user feedback and technical observations from the testing session. "Ryan's speech pattern recognition data will help us refine the algorithm," he noted to his father. "His specific articulation challenges weren't fully represented in our initial development model. That's why user testing is so valuable," Marcus agreed. "Real-world interaction always reveals dimensions that theoretical models miss." This exchange, treating the technology as evolving collaborative work rather than fixed product, demonstrated the iterative philosophy that had made Neurotech an industry leader. Innovation wasn't a single breakthrough, but continuous responsiveness to diverse user experiences. As they departed Westlake Academy, the impact of that morning's work rippled outward in multiple dimensions. Ryan returned to class with newfound technological confidence. The development team incorporated fresh user data into algorithm refinements, and Nexus Solutions' marketing department began developing accessibility-centered distribution models for educational institutions. What had begun as a moment of conflict at 30,000 feet was transforming into systematic change across multiple organizations, potentially benefiting thousands of users with diverse learning needs. The broken iPad aboard Flight 783 had catalyzed not merely device replacement or individual accountability, but institutional transformation with far-reaching implications. As Jordan had observed a week earlier, sometimes it takes something breaking to reveal what was already broken underneath and to create the opportunity to build something better in its place. 1 month later, the conference room at Neurotech headquarters had been transformed from crisis management center to collaborative workspace, where emergency board meetings had once addressed immediate damage control. A diverse team now focused on expanded implementation of the NavigateEase platform. Development staff, educational specialists, and Nexus Solutions marketing representatives gathered around the large table. Project plans displayed on wall-mounted screens. Jordan Thomas occupied a central position, his role as lead developer now formally acknowledged rather than implicitly understood. Despite being the youngest person in the room by decades, he contributed to technical discussions with confidence and clarity that had earned genuine respect from the assembled professionals. "The user data from the first month of beta testing has yielded 3 significant insights," he explained, navigating through analytics displayed on the main screen. "First, the voice command system has achieved 94% accuracy across diverse speech patterns, including users with significant articulation challenges. Second, customizable interface elements have reduced task abandonment by approximately 78% compared to standard applications. Third, our predictive assistance model has demonstrated particular effectiveness for users with executive function difficulties. Dr. Burra Rodriguez, Neurotech's CTO, nodded appreciation for the clear analysis. These metrics exceed our initial projections, particularly regarding the articulation pattern recognition. The algorithm's adaptive learning capacity is performing exceptionally well in real-world conditions. Richard Blackwood, now serving as Nexus Solutions' newly appointed Chief Inclusion Officer alongside his marketing responsibilities, studied the educational institution adoption metrics with focused attention. We've received implementation requests from 147 specialized learning centers across 12 states, plus 23 international inquiries. The demand significantly exceeds our initial distribution projections. This enthusiastic market response institutions actively seeking the technology rather than being marketed to validated the genuine need navigate, ease addressed. Unlike many technologies that created artificial demand through sophisticated marketing, this application responded to existing, unmet needs that educators had long recognized. Carmen Rodriguez, who had been seconded from Transcontinental Airlines to assist with the accessibility training program, shared updates from the airline industry's adoption efforts. The simplified interface has been implemented in our in-flight entertainment systems across 40% of the fleet, with completion expected by quarter end. Passenger feedback has been overwhelmingly positive, particularly from families traveling with children who have learning differences. This implementation extending beyond educational settings to travel environments demonstrated the broader applicability of accessibility principles beyond their original context. Marcus observed the collaborative energy with evident satisfaction, allowing the project team to function without hierarchical intervention. His leadership style, creating space for diverse contributions rather than directing from authority, had clearly influenced the development culture throughout the organization. I have some especially meaningful feedback to share, Blackwood added, displaying a video message on the main screen. This was recorded by my nephew Ryan after 1 month using Navigate Ease for his schoolwork. The video began playing, showing Ryan sitting at his desk at home. Unlike his typically hesitant communication style, he spoke with unusual fluency and confidence. Before using Navigate Ease, I spent most of my energy just trying to understand what assignments were asking me to do. He explained, the complicated instructions and text-heavy interfaces meant I was exhausted before I could even start thinking about the actual work. He demonstrated navigating through his science homework using voice commands, the system responding smoothly to his natural speech patterns. Now I can focus on the ideas instead of struggling with the tools. My last science project received an A, the first one ever. My teacher said the content showed my real understanding of the material. The simple testimony focusing on intellectual engagement rather than merely task completion highlighted the deeper impact of accessible technology. Navigate Ease wasn't simply making assignments easier, it was removing artificial barriers to genuine learning and expression. Ryan's experience has been replicated across our beta testing cohort, Jordan noted as the video concluded. We're seeing average academic performance improvements of 32% among users with dyslexia and related processing differences. These aren't accommodations lowering standards. They're accessibility features revealing capabilities that were previously obscured by interface limitations. This distinction between lowering barriers versus lowering standards reflected the core philosophy that had driven Navigate Ease's development from the beginning. The goal wasn't to simplify content, but to ensure that interface complexity didn't prevent users from engaging with substantive material. The Martinez Educational Initiative implementation is proceeding ahead of schedule, reported Amanda Chen, Operations Director. 17 school districts have completed staff training, with classroom deployment beginning next week. The revised partnership with Nexus Solutions has actually accelerated our timeline by approximately 6 weeks. This reference to the partnership that had nearly collapsed aboard Flight 783 highlighted how effectively the potential crisis had been transformed into enhanced collaboration. Rather than derailing the initiative, the incident had ultimately strengthened and focused the implementation strategy. Blackwood shared additional updates from Nexus Solutions' organizational transformation. The independent review of our inclusion practices has been completed. The assessment identified significant gaps between stated values and operational behaviors, particularly in how we evaluate performance and advancement criteria. This candid acknowledgement addressing systematic issues rather than merely individual behaviors demonstrated the depth of organizational reflection catalyzed by the incident. In response, Blackwood continued, we've implemented 3 specific changes. First, performance evaluations now explicitly include behavioral metrics alongside business results, with particular emphasis on inclusive leadership practices. Second, we've revised our client engagement protocols to prioritize accessibility considerations in all product implementations. Third, we've established an accessibility advisory board, including users with diverse learning needs, to guide product development and marketing approaches. These systematic changes, modifying structural elements rather than merely issuing statements or conducting training, reflected genuine institutional transformation rather than performative compliance. Carmen shared updates from Transcontinental Airlines' parallel transformation. The Respect Every Passenger initiative has now been implemented across our entire operation. All customer-facing staff have completed the initial training module, with quarterly refresher sessions scheduled. Preliminary data shows a 43% reduction in passenger complaints related to discriminatory treatment. This measurable improvement, documented through specific metrics rather than anecdotal assessment, demonstrated the effectiveness of systematic rather than merely symbolic responses to the incident. Jordan, who had been monitoring technical implementation data, highlighted an unexpected pattern. We're seeing particularly strong adoption among users without diagnosed learning differences. Approximately 37% of beta users report choosing Navigate Ease simply because they find the interface more intuitive and less stressful than standard applications. This observation that accessibility features benefited all users, rather than only those with identified differences, underscored a core principle of universal design. Features created for specific needs often improve experiences for everyone. As the meeting continued, the conversation shifted from immediate implementation to longer-term implications. The Navigate Ease platform wasn't merely a single application, but a framework that could potentially transform how technology interfaces were designed across multiple contexts. The core algorithm could be adapted for international markets with relatively modest localization requirements, Jordan noted, displaying language compatibility projections. The pattern recognition system is fundamentally language agnostic, focusing on communication intent rather than specific vocabulary or syntax. This global potential, extending accessibility beyond linguistic and cultural boundaries, highlighted the universal nature of the need being addressed. Learning differences existed in every population, though recognition and support varied dramatically across educational systems. As the meeting concluded, Marcus addressed the assembled team. 1 month ago, many of you witnessed a moment of conflict that could have derailed this entire initiative. Today, you're participating in collaboration that will potentially benefit thousands of users with diverse learning needs. This simple observation, connecting the crisis moment to the constructive outcome without dwelling on blame or recrimination, reflected Marcus's consistent leadership approach throughout the situation. The success we're seeing isn't despite that difficult moment, he continued, but partially because of it. The incident forced conversations and commitments that might otherwise have taken years to develop organically. This perspective, viewing crisis as catalyst rather than merely obstacle, demonstrated the transformative leadership philosophy that had guided the response from the beginning. As team members departed to continue their respective implementation tasks, Richard Blackwood approached Marcus and Jordan. I received an interesting call from Ryan's school this morning. He shared, they've invited me to speak at their educator conference about corporate responsibility in educational technology. Apparently, word has spread about how this partnership evolved. Marcus smiled slightly. Crisis creates both scrutiny and opportunity. How organizations respond reveals their true character beyond public statements. Blackwood nodded, the lesson clearly resonating with his own experience. I've been thinking about something Jordan said aboard the flight, that his app helps people see beyond their first impressions. That's exactly what happened here, just not in the way any of us expected. This insight, recognizing the metaphorical application of the technology's purpose to the human situation surrounding it, demonstrated the deeper transformation that had occurred beyond mere product development or corporate partnerships. 1 month after the broken iPad aboard Flight 783, systematic change was visibly unfolding across multiple organizations. Neurotech's accelerated technology deployment, Nexus Solutions revised performance metrics, transcontinental airlines' enhanced training protocols, and educational institutions' enthusiastic adoption of accessibility-centered design principles. What had begun as a moment of conflict had catalyzed conversation, commitment, and collaboration that might otherwise have taken years to develop, organically demonstrating how effectively crisis can reveal underlying needs and accelerate meaningful transformation when met with principled leadership rather than mere damage control. 3 months later, the auditorium at the National Educational Technology Conference buzzed with anticipation. Educators, developers, and accessibility specialists from across the country had gathered for the keynote presentation. Transforming Barriers into Bridges, the Navigatee's approach to inclusive technology. The session had been moved to the main hall after registration exceeded the original room's capacity by over 300%. Jordan Thomas approached the podium, his youthful appearance causing a momentary ripple of surprise through the audience, despite the biographical information in the conference program. At 11 years old, he was undoubtedly the youngest presenter in the conference's history, yet his composed demeanor suggested confidence rather than nervousness. 3 months ago, he began, his voice clear and steady, Navigatees launched with a simple mission to ensure that interface complexity never prevents users from engaging with substantive content. He navigated to his first slide, displaying before and after comparisons of standard applications versus their Navigatee's enhanced versions. Traditional interfaces assume neurotypical processing patterns, Jordan continued, highlighting specific elements. Complex menu hierarchies, text-dependent navigation, and linear information presentation create artificial barriers for users with diverse learning profiles. Navigatee's doesn't simplify content, it transforms how users access and engage with that content. The presentation continued with remarkable clarity and precision. Jordan moving through technical explanations, user experience data, and implementation case studies with the confidence of a seasoned professional rather than a middle school student. In the front row, Marcus watched with quiet pride as his son commanded the attention of hundreds of education professionals, many of whom had initially attended out of curiosity about the child developer, but were now clearly engaged with the substantive content of his presentation. Beside Marcus sat Richard Blackwood, whose professional transformation over the previous 3 months had been as remarkable as the technology being presented. As Nexus Solutions' Chief Inclusion Officer, he had led systematic revision of the company's operational practices, performance metrics, and distribution priorities changes that had attracted industry attention beyond the Navigatee's implementation. The most significant insight from our first 3 months of deployment, Jordan explained, displaying comprehensive user data, is that features designed for specific learning differences often benefit all users. Voice command functionality developed for users with dyslexia has been adopted by 43% of users without diagnosed learning differences, simply because they find it more efficient and less stressful than traditional interfaces. This observation that accessibility features served universal needs rather than only accommodating specific differences highlighted a fundamental principle that was transforming educational technology development across the industry. Implementation across 412 educational institutions has yielded consistent results, Jordan continued, showing performance improvement graphs. Average engagement metrics increased by 37% among users with identified learning differences and 24% among neurotypical users. These improvements occurred without modifying curriculum content or academic standards, only the interfaces through which users access that content. This distinction between accommodating differences versus lowering standards addressed a persistent concern in educational accessibility discussions. Navigatees demonstrated empirically that removing interface barriers allowed students to demonstrate capabilities that had previously been obscured by access limitations. Following the presentation, the conference hall transformed for a panel discussion featuring key participants in the Navigatees implementation. Jordan was joined by Dr. Rodriguez from Neurotech, Richard Blackwood from Nexus Solutions, Dr. Patel from Westlake Academy, and notably Ryan Blackwood himself, the first student participant ever included in the conference's expert panels. Ryan, as a daily user of Navigatees, how has the technology affected your educational experience? Asked the moderator. Ryan, whose communication confidence had grown substantially over the previous months, replied with uncharacteristic fluency. Before Navigatees, I spent about 80% of my energy just trying to understand what I was being asked to do. Complex instructions, text-heavy interfaces, and inflexible navigation meant I was exhausted before I could even start thinking about the actual content. He demonstrated the voice command functionality on a large display, showing how he navigated his actual schoolwork using natural speech patterns. Now I can focus on ideas instead of struggling with tools. My grade point average has increased from 2.3 to 3.7 this semester, not because the work got easier, but because I can actually show what I know. This personal testimony connecting technological innovation to genuine educational impact resonated powerfully with the assembled educators, many of whom work daily with students facing similar barriers. Dr. Patel shared institutional implementation data from Westlake Academy. We've documented statistically significant improvements across multiple assessment metrics. Most notably, students previously identified as having limited potential have demonstrated capabilities that were simply not visible through traditional interface interactions. This observation that perceived limitations often reflected access barriers rather than actual cognitive differences challenged fundamental assumptions about learning potential that had shaped educational practices for generations. Richard Blackwood addressed the corporate responsibility dimension of the initiative. As distribution partners, we've transformed our approach to educational technology deployment. Rather than marketing features to administrators based on cost efficiency, we now prioritize universal access and diverse user experience in both our development and implementation strategies. This shift from selling features to ensuring access reflected a fundamental reorientation of corporate priorities catalyzed by the Navigate-Ease partnership and Blackwood's personal transformation following the incident aboard Flight 783. The aviation implementation has yielded particularly interesting data, Dr. Rodriguez noted, displaying statistics from transcontinental airlines deployment. In-flight entertainment systems equipped with Navigate-Ease accessibility features have shown 28% higher engagement among all passengers. Not only those with identified learning differences, passenger satisfaction metrics have increased correspondingly, demonstrating the universal benefit of accessible design. This cross-industry application extending beyond educational settings to travel environments highlighted the broader implications of the accessibility-centered approach pioneered by Navigate-Ease. As the panel discussion continued, Carmen Rodriguez shared updates from Transcontinental Airlines' parallel transformation. The Respect. Every passenger initiative has fundamentally changed our service culture. Discriminatory complaint incidents have decreased by 67% over 3 months, while overall passenger satisfaction metrics have increased by 24%. This measurable improvement, documented through specific data rather than anecdotal assessment, demonstrated how effectively systematic response had transformed an organizational culture that previously enabled bias through implicit permission. The discussion eventually turned to the origins of the Navigate-Ease initiative. With characteristic directness, the moderator addressed the incident that had attracted initial media attention. Jordan, your work on this technology gained public attention after an incident aboard a flight where your development device was damaged. How did that experience influence the project's evolution? Jordan considered the question thoughtfully, his response measured and mature. That difficult moment actually accelerated important conversations about accessibility and respect. It helped people understand why this technology matters, not just as a product, but as a way of recognizing that different isn't less. Interface barriers are often invisible to people who don't experience them, until something happens that makes those barriers impossible to ignore. This perspective, viewing conflict as catalyst rather than merely obstacle, demonstrated wisdom beyond his years, transforming what could have been a narrative of victimhood into one of purposeful innovation. Richard Blackwood added his perspective with remarkable candor. I was the person who damaged Jordan's device that day. My behavior reflected assumptions and biases that I hadn't previously recognized in myself. That incident began a personal and professional transformation that has fundamentally changed how I understand accessibility and inclusion. This public acknowledgement, taking responsibility without qualification or defensiveness, demonstrated the authentic nature of Blackwood's transformation over the previous months. Working directly with users like my nephew Ryan, he continued, has shown me that accessibility isn't charity, but equity, ensuring everyone can participate fully regardless of how they process information or navigate interfaces. As the panel concluded, audience questions focused primarily on implementation strategies and technical specifications rather than the incident that had initially drawn attention to the project. The Navigate Ease technology had transcended its dramatic origin story to stand on its own substantive merits. Following the conference session, industry implementation continued accelerating. Educational institutions across 37 states had adopted the platform, with international expansion underway in 12 countries. The technology had evolved beyond its initial application to influence interface design principles across multiple industries, from healthcare systems to financial services. Nexus Solutions had transformed its corporate culture alongside its product offerings, with inclusion metrics now weighted equally with financial performance in executive evaluation and compensation structures. The independent review initiated following the Flight 783 incident had expanded into comprehensive organizational transformation that was attracting attention throughout the technology sector. Transcontinental Airlines had not only implemented the Respect Every Passenger initiative, but had established an industry consortium to develop consistent inclusivity standards across carriers. Carmen Rodriguez now led a specialized training division focused on recognizing and addressing implicit bias in customer service interactions. And at the center of this expanding impact stood Jordan Thomas, not merely a child prodigy, but a genuinely visionary developer, whose understanding of diverse user needs had transformed how technology interfaces were conceptualized across multiple applications. 3 months after the broken iPad aboard Flight 783, systematic change had rippled far beyond the immediate incident, catalyzing transformation that might otherwise have taken years to develop organically. What had begun as a moment of conflict had ultimately accelerated conversations, commitments, and collaborations that were removing barriers for thousands of users with diverse learning needs. As Jordan had observed during the panel discussion, sometimes it takes a barrier becoming visible to create the motivation to remove it entirely, not just for one user, but for everyone who might encounter similar obstacles in the future. Part 6, Lasting Legacy. 6 months later, the main stage at Tech Innovate, Silicon Valley's premier technology conference, had featured legendary figures throughout its history, founders of industry-defining companies, pioneers of revolutionary technologies, visionaries who had transformed how humans interact with digital tools. Today, it featured an 11-year-old boy whose approach to accessible design was reshaping interface development across multiple industries. 6 months ago, Jordan Thomas began his keynote address. Navigate Ease launched with a simple mission to ensure that interface complexity never prevents users from engaging with content. He navigated confidently through his presentation, the massive audience of technology professionals listening with focused attention rather than condescending indulgence. Today, I'm pleased to announce that Navigate Ease has been implemented in over 1,500 educational institutions across 42 states and 18 countries, serving approximately 374,000 users with diverse learning profiles. The data consistently shows that removing artificial interface barriers allows users to demonstrate capabilities that were previously obscured by access limitations. The statistics displayed on massive screens behind him told a compelling story of systematic change. Average academic engagement increased 34% among users with identified learning differences. Task abandonment rates decreased by 71%. And perhaps most significantly, 47% of neurotypical users had voluntarily adopted Navigate Ease features simply because they found them more intuitive than standard interfaces. In the front row, Marcus watched with quiet pride as Jordan commanded the attention of technology leaders who had initially attended out of curiosity about the child genius, but were now clearly engaged with the substantive content of his presentation. Beside Marcus sat Richard Blackwood, whose professional transformation over the previous 6 months had become a case study in corporate leadership evolution. The most important insight from our deployment data, Jordan continued, is that features designed for specific learning differences often benefit all users. Accessibility isn't a niche concern affecting a small population. It's a fundamental design principle that improves experiences across diverse user profiles. This perspective, elevating accessibility from specialized accommodation to universal design principle, was transforming development priorities throughout the technology sector, with major platforms now incorporating Navigate Ease-inspired features into their standard interfaces. Following Jordan's presentation, the conference featured a panel discussion on transformative technology, when innovation serves inclusion. Alongside Jordan and Richard Blackwood sat Carmen Rodriguez, now Director of Inclusive Service Training at Transcontinental Airlines, and Dr. Elena Rodriguez from Neurotech's Accessibility Division. The aviation implementation has yielded particularly interesting data, Carmen noted, displaying statistics from Transcontinental's deployment. In-flight systems equipped with Navigate Ease features show 31% higher engagement among all passengers. More significantly, passenger assistance requests have decreased by 42%, as travelers who previously required help navigating complex interfaces can now manage independently. This real-world impact extending beyond educational settings to travel environments highlighted the universal benefit of accessible design principles pioneered by Navigate Ease. Richard Blackwood shared Nexus Solutions Organizational Transformation data. 6 months ago, we initiated a comprehensive review of how our stated values translated into operational behaviors. The assessment identified significant gaps that we've systematically addressed through structural changes rather than merely symbolic statements. He outlined specific modifications implemented throughout the company performance evaluations, now explicitly included behavioral metrics alongside business results. Promotion criteria had been revised to prioritize inclusive leadership practices, and perhaps most significantly, user experience testing now incorporated diverse learning profiles from the earliest design phases rather than as afterthought accommodations. These changes have yielded measurable business benefits beyond their ethical importance. Blackwood noted, product adoption rates have increased by 27% among educational institutions serving diverse student populations. Customer retention has improved by 34%, and employee satisfaction metrics show a 41% improvement in perceived alignment between stated values and operational realities. This data demonstrating that ethical practice could drive business performance rather than conflicting with it was transforming how technology companies throughout the industry approached accessibility and inclusion. Dr. Rodriguez shared technical evolution data from Navigate Ease's continuous improvement process. The voice command system now achieves 97% accuracy across diverse speech patterns, including users with significant articulation challenges. The pattern recognition algorithm has evolved through machine learning integration, enabling the system to adapt to individual users' communication styles with increasing precision over time. This technical sophistication driving functionality beyond mere accommodation to personalized adaptation demonstrated how accessibility-centered design was advancing overall technology development rather than merely serving specialized needs. The discussion eventually addressed the incident that had initially brought public attention to Navigate Ease. With remarkable candor, Richard Blackwood acknowledged his role directly. 6 months ago, I deliberately damaged Jordan's development device aboard a flight because I made assumptions based on his age and appearance. I couldn't imagine that an 11-year-old was creating technology that would ultimately transform our entire industry's approach to interface design. This public accountability, taking full responsibility without qualification or defensiveness, demonstrated the authentic nature of Blackwood's transformation. Working directly with users like my nephew Ryan has fundamentally changed my understanding of accessibility. He continued, I've witnessed how artificial barriers prevent people from demonstrating their true capabilities, and how thoughtfully designed interfaces can reveal potential that was always present but previously obscured. Jordan addressed the incident with characteristic wisdom beyond his years. That difficult moment actually accelerated important conversations about accessibility and respect. It helped people understand why this technology matters not just as a product, but as a way of recognizing that different isn't less. This perspective, viewing conflict as catalyst rather than merely obstacle, transformed what could have been a narrative of victimhood into one of purposeful innovation. Following the conference, implementation continued accelerating across multiple sectors. Healthcare systems were adopting Navigate Ease principles for patient information interfaces. Financial institutions were implementing the technology for banking applications, and government services were incorporating accessibility-centered design into citizen-facing systems. At Westlake Academy, Ryan Blackwood had transitioned from beta tester to peer mentor, helping fellow students maximize their use of the technology while providing developer feedback that shaped ongoing improvements. His academic performance had continued improving, with his latest achievement first place in the regional science competition, demonstrating capabilities that had been present but previously obscured by interface limitations. Transcontinental Airlines had expanded its respect. Every passenger initiative into a comprehensive industry consortium, with 7 major carriers now implementing consistent accessibility standards and inclusive service training. Carmen Rodriguez regularly addressed industry conferences, sharing data that demonstrated how removing barriers improved experiences for all passengers while reducing operational costs associated with assistance requests. Nexus Solutions had transformed its corporate identity, with accessibility and inclusion now core to its brand positioning rather than merely compliance considerations. The systematic changes initiated following the Flight 783 incident had evolved into comprehensive organizational transformation that was attracting attention throughout the business community beyond the technology sector. At the center of this expanding impact stood Jordan Thomas, no longer described in media coverage as a child prodigy, but increasingly recognized as a genuinely visionary developer whose understanding of diverse user needs was transforming interface design across multiple applications and industries. 6 months after the broken iPad aboard Flight 783, the systematic change catalyzed by that moment of conflict had rippled far beyond the immediate incident or even the specific technology it had threatened. Navigatees had evolved from single application to design philosophy, influencing how developers throughout the technology sector approach the fundamental relationship between humans and digital interfaces. As Jordan had observed during the Tech Innovate panel, the most powerful innovations often emerge not from creating something entirely new, but from removing barriers that prevent people from fully engaging with what already exists, revealing capabilities and potential that were always present but previously obscured by artificial limitations. Reflection and growth. The Thomas family dinner table had always been a place of thoughtful conversation, where ideas were explored with the same respect, whether they came from adults or children. Tonight's discussion was particularly meaningful as Marcus and Jordan reflected on the 6-month journey since the incident aboard Flight 783 had transformed a personal project into an industry-changing movement. "Dad," Jordan asked as they finished their meal, "do you think Mr. Blackwood would have changed if he hadn't found out who you were, if you had just been a regular passenger?" The question, cutting straight to the ethical core of the situation, demonstrated Jordan's consistent focus on authentic change rather than mere consequences or compliance. Marcus considered thoughtfully. "That's an important question. Initial change often comes from external pressure, realizing actions have consequences you didn't anticipate. But lasting transformation has to become internal, driven by genuine understanding rather than fear of punishment." "Like Ryan," Jordan observed. "At first, his uncle got him into the beta testing program because he was trying to fix his mistake. But now Mr. Blackwood actually understands why accessibility matters, not just for his company, but for real people." This insight distinguishing between behavior modification and genuine perspective transformation reflected wisdom beyond Jordan's years. He had observed not just the external actions, but the underlying motivations that had evolved throughout Blackwood's journey. "The data from our school implementations has been incredible," Jordan continued, his passion for the technology's impact evident. "Teachers report that students previously labeled as unmotivated or limited potential are demonstrating capabilities that were always there but hidden by interface barriers." Marcus nodded. "That's perhaps the most significant impact, challenging assumptions about capacity that were actually about access. When we design systems that accommodate diverse processing patterns, we reveal capabilities that were always present but previously obscured. This philosophical dimension, questioning fundamental assumptions about human potential based on standardized interaction models, extended far beyond the immediate technology to address deeper questions about education, assessment, and opportunity. "I received an interesting letter today," Marcus shared, retrieving an envelope from his briefcase. "From Richard Blackwood. He asked that I share it with you when it seemed appropriate." Jordan accepted the letter with curiosity. The handwritten note, on personal stationery rather than corporate letterhead, reflected thoughtful consideration rather than perfunctory obligation. "Jordan," it began, "6 months ago, my arrogance and prejudice nearly destroyed work that has since transformed thousands of lives, including my nephews. While I cannot undo that moment of cruelty, I want you to know how profoundly your response has influenced me." The letter continued, describing specific ways Jordan's gracious handling of the situation and continued inclusion of Ryan in the beta testing program had catalyzed Blackwood's personal and professional transformation. "You could have responded with justified anger," the letter acknowledged. "Instead, You demonstrated the very quality your technology embodies, seeing beyond immediate appearances to recognize deeper possibilities. Your willingness to include Ryan in the beta program, despite my behavior, showed character that I am still working to develop. Jordan read the letter carefully, absorbing its sincerity without the skepticism that might have been justified given their history. He's really changed, he observed quietly. Not just saying the right things, but actually understanding differently. True growth often begins with uncomfortable recognition, Marcus noted. Seeing ourselves clearly is rarely pleasant, but it's essential for meaningful change. As they cleared the dinner table, Jordan shared recent data from Navigate Ease's expanding implementation. The application now served over 400,000 users across multiple educational systems, with documented improvements in academic engagement, content retention, and perhaps most significantly, student confidence and self-efficacy. Dr. Patel sent an amazing video compilation, Jordan mentioned as they settled in the living room. Students from Westlake sharing how Navigate Ease has changed their learning experiences. Ryan's segment is particularly powerful. He cued the video on their home display. Ryan Blackwood appeared on screen. His communication confidence noticeably improved from 6 months earlier. Before Navigate Ease, I believed I wasn't smart enough for certain subjects, Ryan explained candidly. I would look at complicated interfaces with dense text and multiple menu layers, and my brain would just freeze. Teachers thought I wasn't trying or didn't care, but I was actually working harder than anyone just to understand what was being asked before I could even start thinking about answers. He demonstrated the voice command functionality, navigating through complex content with natural speech patterns that included hesitations and non-standard pronunciations. Now the technology adapts to how I communicate, instead of forcing me to adapt to how it's programmed. My last science project won first place at regionals, not because the work got easier, but because I could actually show what I know. This testimony connecting technological innovation to genuine human impact captured exactly why Jordan had been developing Navigate Ease in the first place. The technology wasn't merely a clever application. It was a bridge between diverse cognitive experiences that allowed capabilities to be recognized rather than obscured. Your work has created ripples far beyond what we could have anticipated, Marcus observed as the video concluded. Not just the direct users, but changing how entire industries think about interface design and accessibility. Jordan nodded, though his expression remained thoughtful rather than triumphant. I keep thinking about that moment on the plane when Mr. Blackwood saw me as just a kid playing games, not someone creating something valuable. How many other people get dismissed like that every day because others can't imagine their potential? This question, extending beyond his personal experience to broader patterns of assumption and limitation, demonstrated the empathetic perspective that had driven Navigate Ease's development from the beginning. Jordan's concern wasn't merely that he had been misjudged, but that similar misjudgments were limiting countless others whose contributions remained unrecognized. That awareness is perhaps the most valuable outcome of this entire journey, Marcus observed. Not just the technology itself, but the conversations it has catalyzed about who we recognize as capable of meaningful contribution. Major technology companies throughout the industry were now implementing Navigate Ease-inspired features in their standard interfaces, recognizing that accessibility wasn't merely compliance with legal requirements, but fundamental good design that benefited all users. Educational systems were re-examining assessment practices that had previously conflated interface navigation ability with content mastery. Corporate diversity initiatives were expanding beyond demographic representation to include cognitive diversity and inclusive design principles. The broken iPad aboard Flight 783 had ultimately catalyzed not just a specific technology implementation, but a broader reconsideration of assumptions about capability, contribution, and accessibility that extended far beyond the immediate incident or its principal participants. As Jordan prepared his presentation for next week's Educational Technology Summit, where he would be addressing implementation specialists from 12 countries, he reflected on the journey that had begun with a moment of conflict, but evolved into something far more constructive than mere resolution or even justice. The most important change, he observed to his father, isn't just that Navigate Ease helps kids like Ryan. It's that people are starting to question why interfaces were designed to exclude certain processing patterns in the first place and what other barriers we've created without even realizing it. And this insight that systems often encode assumptions that limit participation in ways their designers never consciously intended reflected the deeper transformation that NavigateEase had catalyzed throughout the technology sector and beyond. 6 months after Richard Blackwood had deliberately damaged Jordan's development device, the incident had transformed from personal conflict to systemic opportunity, revealing limitations that had always existed but remained largely unexamined until a moment of crisis made them impossible to ignore. As Marcus had observed during their conversation, true growth often begins with uncomfortable recognition. The broken iPad aboard Flight 783 had ultimately revealed far more than one executive's arrogance or one child's resilience. It had exposed systemic barriers embedded in technological design that limited countless users whose capabilities remained obscured by interface assumptions rather than actual limitations. And in that revelation lay the possibility of transformation far beyond what any individual response or consequence could have achieved, the opportunity to build systems that revealed rather than obscured human potential in all its diverse expressions. Conclusion and call to action. The International Educational Technology Summit filled San Francisco's largest convention center, with thousands of educators, developers, and policy specialists gathered from across the globe. The main stage featured a remarkable sight: Jordan Thomas and Ryan Blackwood presenting together, an 11-year-old developer and 14-year-old user, demonstrating how accessible technology was transforming educational experiences for students with diverse learning profiles. NavigateEase began with a simple question, Jordan explained to the rapt audience. What if technology adapted to how people naturally think and communicate, rather than forcing users to adapt to how technology is traditionally designed? Ryan demonstrated the practical application, navigating through complex content using voice commands that accommodated his natural speech patterns, including hesitations and non-standard pronunciations that would have confused conventional interfaces. The system learns from me, he explained. It gets better at understanding my specific communication style the more we interact. This personalized adaptation technology, conforming to human variation rather than demanding standardized inputs, represented a fundamental shift in interface design philosophy that was spreading throughout the technology sector. Implementation data from 1,847 educational institutions shows consistent patterns. Jordan continued, displaying comprehensive statistics. When interface barriers are removed, students previously labeled as having limited potential demonstrate capabilities that were always present but previously obscured by access limitations. This evidence-based challenge to fundamental assumptions about student capacity had catalyzed reevaluation of assessment practices throughout educational systems. Schools were increasingly distinguishing between content mastery and interface navigation ability, recognizing that traditional digital tools often conflated these distinct skills. In the audience, Marcus Thomas and Richard Blackwood sat side by side, a partnership that would have seemed impossible 6 months earlier when Blackwood deliberately damaged Jordan's development device aboard Flight 783. Their professional collaboration had evolved from crisis response to genuine innovation, with Nexus Solutions distribution network now deploying NavigateEase technology throughout educational systems globally. The most significant insight from our implementation data, Jordan noted as the presentation continued, is that features designed for specific learning friends often benefit all users. Approximately 43% of neurotypical users have voluntarily adopted NavigateEase features simply because they find them more intuitive than standard interfaces. This observation that accessibility served universal needs rather than merely accommodating specific differences had transformed how major technology companies approached interface design, with NavigateEase-inspired features increasingly incorporated into standard applications rather than offered as specialized accommodations. Following the presentation, the summit featured a panel discussion on technology without barriers, designing for human diversity. Alongside Jordan and Ryan sat Carmen Rodriguez from Transcontinental Airlines Inclusive Service Division, Dr. Elena Rodriguez from Neurotech's Accessibility Team, and Richard Blackwood, whose professional transformation had become a case study in leadership evolution. The aviation implementation has yielded particularly compelling data, Carmen reported. In-flight systems equipped with NavigateEase features show 34% higher engagement among all passengers, while assistance requests have decreased by 47%. This translates to both improved customer experience and reduced operational costs, demonstrating that accessibility benefits business performance alongside its ethical importance. This commercial validation showing that inclusive design drove business results rather than merely serving compliance requirements had accelerated adoption throughout industries beyond education, from healthcare systems to financial services to government interfaces. Richard Blackwood shared Nexus Solutions' organizational transformation data with remarkable candor. 6 months ago, an incident aboard a flight forced us to confront the gap between our stated values and operational behaviors. That uncomfortable recognition catalyzed systematic changes throughout our organization. He outlined specific modifications implemented throughout the company performance evaluations, now explicitly included behavioral metrics alongside business results. Promotion criteria had been revised to prioritize inclusive leadership practices, and product development now incorporated diverse user testing from initial design phases rather than as afterthought accommodations. These changes have yielded measurable business benefits alongside their ethical importance. Blackwood noted, product adoption rates have increased by 31% among educational institutions serving diverse student populations. Customer retention has improved by 38%. And employee satisfaction metrics show a 44% improvement in perceived alignment between stated values and operational practices. As the panel discussion concluded, the moderator posed a final question. What would you identify as the most significant lesson from Navigate Ease's development and implementation journey? Jordan considered thoughtfully before responding. That different isn't less. When we design systems that accommodate diverse ways of thinking and communicating, we don't lower standards, we reveal capabilities that were always present but previously obscured by artificial barriers. Ryan added his perspective as a user. Navigate Ease didn't make me smarter. It removed obstacles that prevented people from seeing intelligence that was already there. The difference isn't in what I know, but in how effectively I can demonstrate my knowledge. This distinction between accommodation and revelation captured the philosophical core of the accessibility movement that Navigate Ease had catalyzed throughout the technology sector and beyond. Richard Blackwood offered the final observation, his perspective particularly meaningful given his role in the journey's dramatic beginning. 6 months ago, I made assumptions based on appearance that nearly destroyed work that has since transformed thousands of lives, including my nephews. The most important lesson I've learned is that potential exists everywhere, but recognition requires deliberate attention to our own biases and limitations. This candid acknowledgement, taking full responsibility without qualification or defensiveness, demonstrated the authentic nature of Blackwood's transformation from antagonist to advocate throughout the Navigate Ease implementation journey. As the summit concluded, Jordan addressed the assembled education technology specialists directly. Navigate Ease isn't just a product, it's a philosophy about the relationship between humans and technology. When we design interfaces that adapt to diverse processing patterns rather than demanding standardization, we reveal capabilities that have always existed but remained unrecognized. He displayed contact information for the implementation support network that had been established to assist educational institutions in adopting the technology. The code architecture is now open source, available for developers worldwide to integrate into existing applications or extend into new contexts. Our goal isn't market dominance, but universal access, ensuring that interface complexity never prevents anyone from demonstrating their true capabilities. This commitment to accessibility over proprietary advantage had accelerated adoption throughout the technology sector, with major platforms incorporating Navigate Ease principles into standard interfaces rather than treating them as specialized accommodations. We invite you to join this movement, Jordan concluded, not just by implementing the technology, but by questioning fundamental assumptions about who we recognize as capable of meaningful contribution. Every time we remove an artificial barrier, we reveal potential that was always present but previously obscured. The auditorium erupted in standing ovation, not mere appreciation for an impressive presentation, but recognition of a transformative approach to technology design that was reshaping fundamental assumptions about human capability and accessibility. As Jordan and Ryan left the stage, they were immediately surrounded by implementation specialists eager to discuss specific applications in their educational contexts. The technology had transcended its dramatic origin story to stand on its substantive merits, catalyzing change throughout the industry and beyond. 6 months after the broken iPad aboard Flight 783, the systematic transformation initiated by that moment of conflict had rippled far beyond the immediate incident or even the specific technology it had threatened. What had begun as interpersonal arrogance had ultimately revealed systemic barriers that limited countless users, and in that revelation lay the opportunity to build interfaces that accommodated human diversity rather than demanding standardization. As Jordan had observed during his presentation, the most significant impact wasn't just helping specific users navigate existing systems, but questioning why those systems were designed to exclude certain processing patterns in the first place, and what other barriers remained embedded in technological design that limited human potential in ways their creators never consciously intended. The journey that began with a broken device had ultimately transformed into a movement that extended far beyond technology, challenging assumptions about capability, contribution, and recognition that shaped opportunities throughout society. And in that transformation lay perhaps the most important lesson that true accessibility isn't merely accommodation for difference, but the recognition that human potential exists in diverse expressions that deserve equal opportunity for contribution and recognition. Technology should adapt to humans, not the other way around. 6 months after a moment that could have ended in mere conflict, Navigate Ease has transformed how we think about accessibility, not as special accommodation, but as fundamental design that benefits everyone. The broken iPad on Flight 783 revealed barriers many never noticed, but that limited countless people daily. Jordan and Ryan's story reminds us that different isn't less, it's just different. When we remove artificial obstacles, we don't lower standards. We reveal capabilities that were always present but previously hidden. Have you witnessed someone's potential being overlooked because of how they process information or navigate interfaces? Share your story in the comments below. Together, we can build technology that reveals rather than obscures human potential in all its diverse expressions. Blacktail Stories, where real-life stories create real change.